Chapter 51. Ever since the emperor ordered people to throw Wei Wei Bai into the pond, many people punished Wei Wei Bai by throwing her into the water. Yes, your highness. Several eunuchs immediately rushed over to grab Wei Wei Bai and threw her into the lotus pond. When Wei Wei Bai entered the water, she heard a familiar reminder. Ding, the male lead is here. Wei Wei Bai pretended not to understand water. She struggled in the water for a few seconds before reaching out to grab a lotus and poking her head out. She lightly coughed a few times. In front of her was a circle of women, and standing in the middle was a man wearing a bright yellow robe. It was clear that he was her target. Her coughing seemed to attract the attention of those people. The consort Qin's voice rang out, "Emperor, little sister Bai's personality is too naughty and her face is too ugly." This consort was afraid that she would scare people, so she punished her by standing in the pond. The man was indifferent. His eyes were incomparably deep and dark, as if any light that entered would be completely destroyed. He lazily turned his head and swept his eyes over the pond as if he didn't care at all. Then he was completely stunned. The woman standing in the pond, it was more appropriate to call her a young girl. She slightly tilted her head and looked at him with a pair of clear eyes that were like the stars in the night sky. Her lips were red without any lipstick and her skin was white like a pear. Her beautiful face had a trace of naivety and her thick and smooth hair was already disheveled, but it gave off a feeling that made people's hearts palpitate. The pond water soaked her light green clothes, tightly sticking to her petite and beautiful body. She seemed to be a little panicked, but also a little curious as she secretly looked at him. With this look, the corners of her eyes slightly tilted and a faint pink color appeared. It was so beautiful that it was like the entire peach blossom forest had bloomed early, creating a dazzling scene. The man felt his heart being hit. It didn't hurt, but it itched. He frowned and immediately looked away, as if he couldn't bear Wei Wei Bai's gaze. Ding! The male lead's favorable impression has increased to 10. Wei Wei Bai did not react. She just wanted to show her face openly. Therefore, the colors that she applied to her face were all plant colors, which would fall off upon contact with water. Previously, the original owner of the body was an idiot, afraid that her scary makeup would fall off, so she used colors that would not fade when exposed to water, causing her to wash her face for a long time. She should show her face now. She didn't want to increase her favorability. Just like that, he came knocking on his door? The system said coldly, "What happened to rolling in a pile of corpses and not being moved by beauty?" Wei Wei Bai was silent for a while. "Department, don't you think Xing Siyu's eyesight is too good? It has to be above 50. Question mark. Wei Wei Bai, I can't see his face clearly from where I am standing. How did he see me? That's too far." Just as the system was about to reply, Wei Wei Bai sighed softly. "Indeed, my beautiful face is like the sun, able to illuminate the entire world. At the same time, it also illuminates the black eyes of others, allowing them to see my incomparably beautiful appearance from afar." The system felt that it was going to die soon. Shameless was already unable to describe this host. It had no words. Xing Siyu, who was far away, took a group of harem women and left in a grandiose manner. Just when Wei Wei Bai thought that the 10 points of favorability were fake, the emperor's eunuch came over and sent her back to Qingwen Pavilion. After returning, Wei Wei Bai had just finished washing herself when she received the news that she was going to serve the emperor tonight. After sending away the eunuch who came to inform her, Bai Wei Wei immediately ran in front of the bronze mirror and smeared green and purple paint on her face. It was an eyesore. Button they. Chapter 52. The system couldn't bear to look at her. "Can't you not wear makeup?" Wei Wei Bai coldly snorted. "I can only wear makeup when the time is right. Do you think I like this yaksha face?" Suddenly, Wei Wei Bai's movements paused. "System, do you think I need XXO to serve him in bed?" "System, isn't that nonsense? Do you think Xing Siyu is just chatting with you under the quilt?" Wei Wei Bai bit her lip and was speechless for a long time. She suddenly washed her face and took out the original paint that couldn't be washed off with water. "System, what are you doing, host? This is very difficult to wash off." Wei Wei Bai gritted her teeth and angrily said, "I don't want to serve him in bed. I want to scare Xing Siyu into impotence." This is my first night, and I want to give it to a strange man. System. It doesn't matter who you give it to. Just think of it as a sacrifice for favorability. Wei Wei Bai fiercely painted her face. I don't want to. I want to keep it for myself. I am so beautiful, I can't bear to give it to others. System. Oh my God. This host is really crazy. In the evening, the ants and eunuchs in the palace who came to serve saw Wei Wei Bai's terrible face and collectively raised their eyebrows. Did this host want to scare people to death in the middle of the night? It was estimated that she didn't need to do anything else. Just standing outside and there would be demons and ghosts, scaring many palace maids and eunuchs to death. But the emperor wanted people to serve him in bed. It was estimated that he wanted to change his taste. Although this taste was a bit heavy, the eunuch Su-da lit up the lamp. Then he turned around and respectfully said, "The emperor, it's time to rest." Shang Xiu put down the pin in his hand and elegantly got up. "Then let's go." Su-da was stunned. In the past, he had to be urged 3 times, but today it seemed like he couldn't wait. He remembered that the emperor asked him faintly during the day, "Who is the person in the pool?" Su-da was the chief eunuch in the palace. He was in charge of everything, so of course he knew who it was. After he answered, he heard the emperor's cold voice saying, "Tonight, we'll flip her sign." The emperor always flipped the cards according to the order. He flipped 1 card a day and did not favor anyone. However, when she thought about how Wei Wei Bai had accidentally exposed her face, she felt that men always like to try new things, so it was just a moment of interest. When they arrived at the door of the palace, Shang Xiu let everyone retreat and went in alone. The light in the bedroom was very bright, enough to see Wei Wei Bai sitting on the bed clearly. When Shang Xiu saw her face, his footsteps paused. He suddenly turned around and pulled out a sword hanging on the wall. The sword flashed and slashed towards Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai was still communicating with the system. This emperor had a handsome face, long legs, and black hair. It was obvious that he had good kidneys. Although he wasn't as good-looking as her, he was still considered a handsome man. She would just have to make do with her first night. But just as they finished talking, a sword slashed down. Wei Wei Bai's scalp exploded. Her whole body rolled directly and awkwardly drilled under the bed. Fuck, you dead system. Is this the favorability of 10? This is negative 10. System. There is no mistake, it is 10. Outside the bed, Shang Xiu's voice was cold and gloomy. Where did this monster come from? She dares to come here and be presumptuous. Monster Wei Wei Bai was silent for a while, then weakly said, "Emperor, this concubine promised in vain." Shang Xiu, ding. The male lead's favorability has decreased by 8, remaining 2. When Wei Wei Bai heard the system's voice, she couldn't help but grind her teeth. Damn you, Shang Xiu, she was wrong about him. She thought that this guy would not be moved by beauty. As a result, when she didn't have a face, his favorability dropped faster than anyone else's. Teeth. Chapter 53. You can search Transmigration System, Male God, come to Sashu. Come in Baidu to find the. Shang Xiu coldly said, "Come out, what a scandal." Wei Wei Bai burst into tears. Was she willing to do this? Shang Xiu held the sword and waited for a while before he heard Wei Wei Bai's voice trembling as she asked, "Then the emperor. Will the emperor not cut off the concubine?" Shang Xiu frowned, thinking of Wei Wei Bai's face just now. The hand holding the sword tightened a bit. He reluctantly said, "I know you are a human, so I won't cut you." The system laughed twice. "You said that as if you weren't a human." Wei Wei Bai really wanted to pack Shang Xiu and the system together and flush them down the toilet. Shang Xiu waited for a while and saw a petite person slowly crawling out from under the bed. She looked up and secretly glanced at him. Her eyes were like a pool of water under the light, but they disappeared in a flash under her drooping eyelids. Wei Wei Bai was just about to salute him, but Shang Xiu had already looked at her face with disgust and then put the sword back. "Someone come, wash Bai Ying's face." Under his order, Wei Wei Bai suffered a calamity. The ant who came in was like an enemy of her face, fiercely washing her makeup with water and oil. She also changed her clothes. It was a loose and beautiful gauze dress. and the gauze dress was decorated with hand-embroidered peach blossoms. When everyone was done, they retreated. Shang Siyu, who was sitting on the side drinking tea, casually looked up and was stunned. Under the light of the lamp, the girl sitting on the bed placed her snow-white hands on her knees in an orderly manner. She slightly turned her face, her cheeks were flushed, and her skin was white like jade. Without that terrible makeup covering her face, this beautiful face could simply cause an impact on anyone. Ding. The male lead's favorability has increased to 10. Ding. The male lead's favorability has increased to 15. Continuously increasing the favorability, Wei Weibai couldn't help but complain to the system. I didn't expect Shang Siyu to be such a frivolous man. Seeing such a good face, the favorability of this person shot up like a rocket. The system was just about to say a few words of comfort. She then heard Wei Weibai say, "But I like his frivolity. Do you think that if I let him lick my face, his favorability towards me will rise to 100? The system wished it could strangle Wei Weibai to death. You dream faster. Don't chat with me if you don't have anything to do. I'm busy. After the system finished speaking, it immediately blocked Wei Weibai. It was definitely the first system in history to block its host. It had no choice, it was forced to do so. Knowing that the system had left because of her nagging, Wei Weibai felt a little melancholy. It was so lonely without the system to tease her. She raised her head and secretly glanced at Shang Siyu, only to be met with a pair of eyes as black as the abyss. His eyes were so cold that no matter how beautiful they were, they couldn't warm him up. Wei Weibai pursed her lips and nervously looked down at her feet again. Shang Siyu suddenly said, "Are you afraid of me?" Wei Weibai trembled and carefully replied, "This concubine is not afraid." Shang Siyu also saw her exposed feet. Under the gauze, half of her smooth and delicate calves were exposed, and her white toes were gently curled up. He felt that his throat was a little dry, and couldn't help but drink a few more mouthfuls of tea. "Why do you dress yourself up so strangely?" Wei Weibai seemed to remember something, and stretched out her hands to cover her face in horror. "Please don't look at this concubine's face. This concubine is ugly." Shang Siyu looked at her face that was enough to cause the downfall of a country, and felt that his temples couldn't stop throbbing. If this was considered ugly, then there was no such thing as a beautiful person in this world. The download address is at https://www.sashu.com. Chapter 54. That's ugly. Don't tell me that you're beautiful just now. Shang Siyu rarely thought of teasing people. Wei Weibai was silent. Shang Siyu was also silent. After a long time, he asked, "You don't really think that's beautiful, do you?" Wei Weibai looked at him with trepidation. Her fingers that were as white as cream uneasily grabbed her sleeves. She seemed to want to answer that it wasn't beautiful, but her eyes turned and she told the truth. This concubine thinks that it's beautiful. Because this concubine was ugly since childhood, it took me a lot of effort to learn this top-notch face-changing technique to cover this concubine's unsightly appearance. Shang Siyu finally understood that there was indeed a strange disease in this world that could see the beautiful as ugly, and the ugly as beautiful. And Wei Weibai should have this strange disease. He was suddenly a little curious. "Then in your eyes, am I ugly or beautiful?" Wei Weibai's eyes turned and secretly looked at Shang Siyu. These few eyes looked delicate and innocent, which made his eyes darken a lot. After she finished looking, she immediately bowed her head, but her fingers lost their color because she grabbed her sleeves too hard. Shang Siyu took another sip of tea, only to find that the teacup had long been empty. He had never talked to a woman like this before, but surprisingly, he didn't dislike it at all. Wei Weibai said cautiously, "The emperor is tall and mighty. You are a man among men. Your appearance can't limit your majesty at all." Shang Siyu said faintly, "So you're saying that I'm ugly?" Shang Siyu's hand that put down the teacup paused, and the expression on his face almost collapsed. She didn't dislike. He looked ugly? When Wei Weibai saw him like this, she stammered, "You're not ugly, not ugly. You just look more different, unique." Shang Siyu. Wei Weibai still wanted to comfort him, but Shang Siyu was afraid that he would be angered to death. He immediately got up and picked up a cup of tea, My beloved concubine has said so much. You should be thirsty. Drink some tea. He must have found her too talkative and stuffed her mouth with tea. Wei Wei Bai drank her tea absent-mindedly, thinking that she was going to sleep with this strange man later. I can't help but knock on the system. 4. Do you have any stand-in services? Can I pay on credit? That's half a love heart at most. The system was as silent as a chicken. Wei Wei Bai, which one? Any more and I'll be dead. Please make an exception for me. Wei Wei Bai, department? For 4? 0? All of them? Fuck you. Shang Siyu saw Bai Wei Wei drink the tea, and suddenly pushed his hand, directly pressing her onto the bed. My dear concubine, the bed is warm at night, and the moon is shining outside the window. The weather is just right for us to sleep together. This beast, if he wanted to sleep with her, just say it directly. Why did he have to be so polite? Shang Siyu took off his clothes, and his eyes were frighteningly deep. However, Wei Wei Bai was confused. She was shocked that something was wrong with her. Her head was dizzy, and she suddenly remembered the cup of tea just now. When Wei Wei Bai fainted, her face began to redden, and the half-naked Shang Siyu got out of bed. After waiting for a while, he saw Wei Wei Bai moaning. Her clothes were already in a mess, and the scorching heat coming from her body made her sweat. A thin layer of sweat soaked her muslin clothes, and her exquisite jade body gave off a delicate and alluring allure under the candlelight. Shang Siyu felt that his chest and abdomen were burning, and he almost couldn't hold it in. The Emperor? Wei Wei Bai seemed to look at him for help, and her eyes began to slacken. Shang Siyu took 2 steps forward, but in the next second, he turned around. His face was gloomy and terrible. His hand had already touched the sword just now, and he pulled it out. Tea. Chapter 55. When Wei Wei Bai was carried back to Qingyuan Pavilion, she was completely dumbfounded. Who was she? Where was she going? Where should she go? She felt that she had spent the whole night with Shang Siyu, but when she thought about it carefully, it hurt. She couldn't think of any details at all. Hong Shou, Lu Lei, and Xiao Xiazi all kneeled on the ground, happy that their master was favored. On the other hand, Wei Wei Bai, who was lying on the bed, was knocking on the system. System, what happened last night? Wei Wei Bai threatened, if you don't respond to me, I'll jump into the water and commit suicide. The system laughed coldly. Jump, jump. I've tolerated you for a long time. Can you stop calling me 0, 4, 4, 4, 0? Wei Wei Bai, then what should we call it? Baby? The system shuddered and said angrily, call me your grandfather. Wei Wei Bai immediately sucked up to him and said, damn you. The system was speechless. It felt like something was wrong. Although the system had been arguing with Wei Wei Bai, it still did what it was supposed to do. It played the video that it had recorded last night and sent it directly to Wei Wei Bai. Shang Siyu pulled out his sword, the cold light flashed, and the coldness on his face was clearly visible. As for Wei Wei Bai, she was still gasping for breath. She seemed to be unable to bear something as she clutched onto the brocade quilt. Her voice was soft and sorrowful as she called out, Emperor, this concubine feels very uncomfortable. Shang Siyu turned his head and saw the girl on the bed with bright red lips. Her eyes were full of charm, and her body was open without any defense, as if she was tempting him. She was in a trance, but her broken moans made Shang Siyu feel as if he had been electrocuted, and half of his body went numb. Shang Siyu took a few deep breaths and found that he still couldn't calm down. Bai Weiwei once again called out in a low voice that made people's hearts tremble. He turned around and began to wield his sword fiercely. Weiwei Bai didn't seem to feel anything. Her face was full of confusion. She took off her clothes, and in the dark bedding, she was so sweet that he couldn't help himself. And every time Shang Siyu saw this, he would use more force to wield his sword. Wherever the sword light flashed, tables, chairs, stools, and cabinets were all destroyed. One of them was charming and romantic, seductively rolling around on the bed while hugging the quilt. One of them had a gloomy and ruthless expression as he brandished the sword in his hand. The beauty of this scene could almost be considered a work of art. At this point in the video, Weiwei Bai was silent for a while before she said awkwardly, "Did I sleep with the sheets last night?" The system was silent for a while. If you think so, then so be it. Wei Wei Bai rubbed her face and felt that her head was about to explode. What's going on? Shang Xiyu let his concubine drink the medicine and let her go to bed alone. Then what about him? Just a sword dance? This was the first time that Wei Wei Bai felt that this world was so strange and so unreasonable. The system said, "There is still a video. Do you want to watch it?" Wei Wei Bai struggled for a while, but still endured the danger of embarrassment and clicked yes. After Shang Xiyu finished his sword dance, he gasped fiercely and sweated all over. His face was full of anger, and his face was flushed. Wei Wei Bai on the bed was also quiet. The drug had passed. Shang Xiyu carried his sword and walked to the bed with a cold face. He saw Wei Wei Bai lying in the middle of the quilt. Her soft body was slightly trembling, and her face was half-turned. Even after such a lewd dream, there was still no trace of filth. And teeth. Chapter 56. He looked at her and didn't know why he thought of the peach blossoms, the color when they were half-blooming. It was so beautiful that it seemed so unreal, as if it would disappear at any time. Shang Xiyu looked at her blushing little face. He didn't know why, but as if he was bewitched, he bent down and gently kissed her lips. A sweet smell came, and Shang Xiyu was stiff, like a young boy who had never seen a woman before. He didn't know how to deal with this feeling. He tried to stick out the tip of his tongue and pried open her unguarded lips, but he didn't wait to go inside. The voice of the head eunuch came from outside. "Your Majesty, it's dawn." Shang Xiyu's movements paused, and he left Wei Wei Bai with some embarrassment. Then he turned around and didn't dare to look at her. His breath was in a mess. He stabilized his breath and coldly said, "I know, let someone serve me." After that, the sword in his hand slipped from his fingers, and a few drops of blood fell on the quilt, acting as Wei Wei Bai's first night. When he heard the sound of the palace servants coming in to serve, he almost reflexively pulled the bed curtain and covered Wei Wei Bai's naked body. After waiting for the palace maids and eunuchs to take care of everything, Shang Xiyu's expression was obscure as he looked at the well-dressed Bai Wei Wei sleeping on the bed. After everyone retreated, the head eunuch came over. Shang Xiyu seemed to have made a decision and said to his most trusted eunuch, "Her." The head eunuch bowed, and a trace of surprise flashed on his face. "Your Majesty, are you sure?" Shang Xiyu closed his eyes tiredly. "Her. I need a reason to become an incapable ruler, so that I can make a move against the four great families." The four great families were the families of the ministers who controlled the domestic politics. It was no secret that the dynasty was controlled by the ministers, and it wasn't a matter of 1 or 2 years, but several generations. This led to the emperor and the four great families fighting each other for hundreds of years, and as a result, the emperor's rights were getting less and less. When Shang Xiyu was on the throne, he didn't rely on the power of the four great families. The most powerful woman in the harem, Consort Chen, was the only daughter of the leader of the four great families, the Su family. If it wasn't for the fact that Consort Chen was still childless, she would have already become the empress. Shang Xiyu knew that if he wanted to fight with a powerful minister, he could win, but it would take decades. By that time, his country would be almost destroyed. It would be better to take a different approach and directly exterminate them. However, the reputation of the four great clans in the country was not bad. If there was no reason to confiscate their property, it would cause a commotion. Therefore, he had to set up a target so that everyone's hatred would be focused on another person. After killing the four great clans, and then killing that target, they would be able to vent the anger of the commoners. What kind of target could affect an emperor? Of course, it was the demoness who brought disaster to the country, who charmed the emperor until he completely lost his soul. Shang Xiyu's eyes darkened as he looked at the sleeping Wei Wei Bai. He suppressed the uncomfortable feeling in his heart and said very firmly, "She is beautiful enough, stupid enough. If we use her well, she is a very good chess piece." Suda pondered for a moment before replying respectfully, "Your Majesty is wise. This is indeed the best method. But Bai Ying has no reason to target the four great clans. This?" Shang Xiyu impatiently interrupted him. "Then create one. Consort Qin will definitely be dissatisfied with her." She used to be dissatisfied with the concubines with bad family backgrounds and would frame other people's families. We will just stand by and wait for the results. Record. Chapter 57. The head eunuch bowed his head, yes. Shang Xiyu got up and picked up the sword. Let her have a higher starting point and give her the title of Zhao Yi. I'm going to do my morning exercise. The head eunuch glanced around. Although the things destroyed by the sword last night had been replaced with new ones, it could still be seen that Shang Xiyu's heart was not calm. Shang Xiyu would only use the sword when his heart was disturbed. After watching the video, Wei Wei Bai, system. After being silent for a while, Wei Wei Bai dragged the quilt and wrapped herself up like a dumpling. It was terrible. She was going to become a demoness who would bring disaster to the country. She was just joking, but the result was that she was really forced to do something beyond her ability. The system comforted her. Don't be sad. It's just a bad reputation. After being dismembered by 5 horses, you will be spat on for thousands of years. Wei Wei Bai finally couldn't help but look up and swallow the sad tears. Damn. I thought I met an easy target, but the result is not as good as the last one. Spicy chicken system, you changed the target for me. I don't want to be killed after being used by Shang Xiyu. Shang Xiyu's intention was to use her hand to destroy the 4 great families. Then, when the 4 great clans were finished, he would kill her to vent the anger of the commoners. The system had some rare sympathy. Actually, if you succeed, he won't kill you. Probably. Bai Weiwei whimpered as she hugged the pillow. She fiercely scolded the system. You're a broken system. A spicy chicken idiot waste with no merit. Under other people's systems, you can enter the ground, fly, and even drive a spaceship to set off fireworks. Each one of them is a considerate little cotton-padded jacket with a cheat. You, on the other hand, can't do anything. Even if I change the target, you're still making excuses. What can I expect from you? The system didn't dare to say anything. Wei Wei Bai began to twist the sheets. The system was shocked. What are you doing? Wei Wei Bai, I'm going to hang myself, so as not to bring disaster to the country. System. After venting, Wei Wei Bai finally remembered what she had to do. That's not right. Why did Shang Xiyu give me drug tea and deliberately let me think that we were in bed? Wei Wei Bai's expression turned serious. It seems that none of the women in the harem are pregnant. Perhaps they are still virgins like me. The system was puzzled as well. That's right. They're all their own women, yet they're not eating them. Even if they don't want the women of the 4 great clans to get pregnant, they should have plenty of contraceptive methods. Wei Wei Bai pondered for a while before slowly spitting out the truth. I think I understand now. Shang Xiyu is impotent. The system also felt that it was possible. Just as it was about to agree, Wei Wei Bai had already taken out a bronze mirror from the side and looked at her own face. I'm so beautiful that I can cause the downfall of a country and its people. Even if I were to lie on the bed naked, he would still rather practice swordsmanship. He's either impotent or gay. The system looked at Wei Wei Bai's intoxicated look in the mirror and couldn't help but buy more than a dozen liters of eye drops to wash its eyes. Wei Wei Bai had just finished feeling sorry for herself when the decree of conferment came. From Bai Ying to Bai Zhao Yi, she directly flew from the 9th grade to the 3rd grade. This speed of promotion was simply like adding a helix gun, which was amazing. Then there were all kinds of treasures and jade as a reward. At the same time, there were also several servants. One of them was the first aunt, who had the authority to manage all the palace maids. When she came, she brought Shang Xiyu's verbal instructions. By Zhao, he was not allowed to apply those colorful powders so as not to hurt her skin. Wei Wei Bai faced this and finally had a headache. She reached out and touched her forehead. Oh no, Shang Xiyu is serious. Read the full text. Download the full text. Read the full text. Chapter 58. A man who used her as a target, who was impotent and ferocious. It was much more difficult to successfully capture him than to capture a man who had a grudge against her. Sure enough, at night, she flipped through her card again. Wei Wei Bai took a bath, her face was clean, and there was no smell of cosmetics. The clothes she wore were also chosen by herself. She was petite, wearing a soft green silk dress She looked like a weak willow in the wind, as fresh as a crisp leaf in spring. She looked at Shang Siyu's palace and coldly snorted. Even if he is gay, this old lady can straighten him up. Daring to make her a target, she would be sorry for herself if she didn't torture him to death. Shang Siyu was in the palace early. When he saw Wei Wei by coming in to salute, his eyes moved, and he immediately stood up and intimately supported her. My beloved concubine, why salute? What if you hurt your knees? By Wei Wei's goosebumps rose. A man with a paralyzed face, whispering such mushy words in a soft voice. So scary. Shang Siyu held Wei Wei Bai's hand. The delicate and boneless touch made him couldn't help but use force. So soft. Is this a woman's hand? Shang Siyu sighed in his heart, and then quietly led her to his table. Is this a painting painted by the emperor? Wei Wei Bai looked at the imposing landscape painting in front of her. There was a tiger on it. Landscape, tiger. The meaning of this painting, wasn't it to get rid of the tiger? Of course, Wei Wei Bai couldn't say that. She looked amazed and said, the emperor's painting is really beautiful. How is it beautiful? Shang Siyu asked with a smile. Wei Wei Bai frowned in distress. This concubine has been very knowledgeable about painting since she was a child. The emperor is making things difficult for this concubine. Shang Siyu couldn't help but smile, a sincere smile. This Wei Wei Bai, how could she be different from any other woman he met? Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 20. Bai Wei Wei heard this familiar voice and breathed a sigh of relief. She made the right bet. For a man like Shang Siyu, a woman who can break his inner barriers must be a woman who can make him relax. As long as she was silly, he would feel comfortable. Once he felt comfortable, he would have a good impression of her. Although beauty could make a man yearn for a moment, after looking at a person's appearance for a long time, anyone would get tired of it. Shang Siyu held her hand. My beloved concubine, are you tired? Let's rest. Wei Wei Bai shyly lowered her head. Her face was flushed red, and she looked as beautiful as a flower. Shang Siyu's heart was in a mess, but he quickly pressed down his restless heart and led her to the bed. Then, he picked up the tea beside him and said, My dear concubine, have some tea? Wei Wei Bai shook her head. Can this concubine make a presumptuous request? Shang Siyu sneered coldly in his heart. Sure enough, all women were insatiably greedy. Just a little favor, and they dared to ask for more. Emperor, please sit down. Wei Wei Bai lowered her head and nervously twisted her fingers as she spoke in a soft voice. Shang Siyu smiled coldly and then sat beside her. He wanted to see what excessive request she would make. Quietly, Bai Wei Wei grabbed a corner of his clothes. Then, she secretly glanced at him and found that Shang Siyu did not respond. She immediately showed a bright and silly smile. Then she tied the corner of her shirt to the corner of his shirt. A small and cute knot appeared. Shang Siyu waited for a long time, but Wei Wei Bai didn't ask for anything. What does my beloved concubine want? You can ask for anything. Wei Wei Bai shyly turned her head, Emperor. This concubine has already gotten what she wants. Shang Siyu was speechless as he looked at the knot between them. She wants this? What is this for? Wei Wei Bai softly said, This is what my mother told me. She said that when a couple gets married, they will tie this knot. In this way, the couple will be happy for a lifetime and will be together forever. Shang Siyu was stunned, and his heart was in chaos. But he didn't want to use the sword at all. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 25. Download the at https://m/sashu. COMT. Chapter 59. How could a secular couple get along with each other the same as an emperor's concubine? Just thinking about it was a rebellious thing. Shang Siyu wanted to say something, but looking at Wei Wei Bai's timid and implicitly admiring eyes, he suddenly couldn't bear to attack her. When he picked up the teacup, his fingers trembled a little. When he killed someone for the first time, his hands didn't tremble. Today, under Wei Wei Bai's admiring eyes, he couldn't even hold the teacup steadily. Wei Wei Bai obediently drank it and began to feel dizzy. Shang Siyu whispered, My dear concubine, it's time to rest. Wei Wei Bai nodded foolishly. Her cheeks were flushed, and her mind began to be unclear. She was prepared this time, knowing that once the drug took effect, she would lose her mind, and her hands and feet would be soft. But there was still some mobility. Before she completely lost her mind, she suddenly boldly reached out and hugged Shang Siyu. Her arm was like a jade lotus root, obviously soft and boneless, but it made Shang Siyu stiff and he didn't know how to break free. He eagerly looked at the sword hanging on the wall and wanted to grab the sword to resist the gentle strength of her arm. But in the next moment, Wei Wei Bai squeezed herself into his strong and broad chest and tried to rub against him like a kitten. Shang Siyu's breathing was heavy. None of the women in the harem could get close to him. When he faced the concubines who flipped their plates, he just gave them tea. Even if it was the imperial concubine who was more difficult to deal with, he would use tea with a bit of incense to deal with her. He grew up in the military camp since childhood. The military brothel was a place he couldn't go. The army was full of men, and he had never been in contact with women. Back then, he had rashly led an army to save his mother. But it was too late. His mother, who was regarded as a disgrace by the late emperor, was bullied by the people in the palace. Unexpectedly, when the crown prince was forcing the emperor to abdicate, she was killed by the empress at that time, the empress dowager who was now under house arrest. Human swine. Her limbs were cut off, her eyes were dug out, her ears were pierced, her tongue and nose were cut off and put in a jar. As soon as he arrived, he saw his mother dying under such torture. If it wasn't for the 4 great clans stopping him, he would have cut that bitch who killed his mother into 1,000 pieces on the spot. At that time, he swore in his heart that he would eradicate the Empress Dowager and the 4 great clans. When he saw the women in the harem, he was reminded of the times when he was bullied by the harem when he was young. He was well aware of how vicious the women in the palace were. When he touched them, it was just a simple handshake. He didn't feel their softness, but he thought of his mother's rotten body. He was so disgusted that he couldn't eat for 3 days. If it wasn't for Su De's strange hallucinogenic medicine, he wouldn't know how to deal with those venomous women. As for Wei Wei Bai, she was probably the first woman he had ever met that he didn't dislike. Shang Siyu's body was as hard as a stone. He should have pushed away the presumptuous Wei Wei Bai, but his body defied the instructions of his brain and refused to get up. Her soft body was like warm water, and the temperature was rising into flames. Her delicate fingers, like willow branches, went deep into his clothes without any offensive power. Everywhere she touched, it ignited his passion that had never been awakened. He could hardly breathe. Every time he breathed, it was the faint fragrance of her body, which was different from the fragrance of spices. Emperor, this concubine is uncomfortable. Wei Wei Bai hugged him and rubbed against him as she begged in a low voice. Record. Chapter 60. He was also uncomfortable. Extremely uncomfortable, unbearable. Shang Siyu suddenly clasped her face, bowed his head and kissed her on the lips. Wei Wei Bai vaguely whispered a few words, but all her breath was swallowed up by him. At first, he was curious and carefully licked her lips, as if he was tasting something delicious and gently nibbling. Wei Wei Bai felt that it was difficult to breathe and tried to escape, but this aroused the fierce side of Shang Siyu's character. He was no longer careful, but forcefully broke into her lips, overbearingly forcing her tongue to dance with him. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 30. Wei Wei Bai's eyes were blurred. She couldn't hear the system's reminder. She could only helplessly let him do whatever he wanted. She felt that she was floating. Her lips were being attacked and gnawed by a beast. When she remembered to breathe through her nose, her neck was powerless and her eyes couldn't help but droop. When Shang Siyu realized that something was wrong, Wei Wei Bai had already fainted. He was startled, and the hot feeling in his body cooled down. He hugged the woman lying softly on his chest, completely unable to calm his chaotic breathing. Shang Siyu reached out and touched her pulse on the back of her neck. He knew that it was because he was too unrestrained and didn't know how to control himself, which made her short breaths and pause before she fainted. Although he knew that there was no problem, Shang Siyu still couldn't control his panic. He called the head eunuch over and asked him to call the imperial doctor. The head eunuch saw that Bai Jiaoyi was tightly wrapped in a quilt. Even her face was not exposed, and the wrinkles on his old face twitched. This person shouldn't have fainted because the quilt was too tight. She didn't even have room to breathe, right? After the imperial doctor came over, he also checked her pulse with a red thread through the curtain. Of course, it wasn't a big deal. She just fainted for a while. She just needed to sleep until she woke up naturally. Shang Xiyu didn't feel anything, but the head eunuch next to him saw it clearly. His master had walked out of a cruel environment where he had nothing at all. He had never received anything good since he was young. And once they got it, their possessiveness would explode. It was as if they were afraid that others would snatch it away from them. They would keep a close eye on the person, not even willing to let others take a look at a single strand of hair. Suda's heart was faintly uneasy, although he knew that Shang Xiyu had always been rational and indifferent. But this Bai Jiaoyi may very well become a special master. Wei Bai had been promoted to Jiaoyi in one night, and she had served him in bed for 2 days in a row. Furthermore, the emperor had made an exception in the middle of the night to summon an imperial physician. This had stirred up 1,000 waves in the harem. When the imperial consort heard this, the teacup in her hand was heavily placed on the table. She coldly snorted. She's just a foxy woman. It's understandable that the emperor wants something fresh for a while. She never thought that she would make such a big mistake by throwing Wei Bai into the water on her birthday. She should have known that Wei Bai was so pretty. I shouldn't have let her see the emperor. I should have destroyed her before she even showed her face. The imperial consort's eyes were vicious. She coldly ordered, "Tell this to my father. My father loves me the most. If he knows, Wei Bai won't be able to recover." When Wei Bai was confused and moved to another place to live, she realized that she had become the center of gossip. Shang Xiyu disliked Qingyuan Pavilion, so he immediately changed it to a big and good place with a large peach forest. The gossipy system excitedly said, "Did you know? In the beginning, it was widely spread in the palace that Shang Xiyu, this guy, was invincible. He did it 18 times in one night, making you hover between life and death. You could only call for an imperial physician." Read the full text. Download the full text. Read the full text. Chapter 61. The gossipy system continued. Do you know? In the palace, there was a rumor that Shang Xiyu is as powerful as a beast. He did it 32 times in one night, making you wish you were dead. The gossipy system continued. Do you know? In the palace, there is a rumor that Shang Xiyu is worse than a beast. He did it 101 times in one night. Not only did he make you die, but he also let the imperial doctor apply preservatives on you. Wei Bai glared at the system fiercely. Do you know? The first system in history to be dismembered by the host will be born in the next second. The system laughed twice and immediately said, Isn't the favorability going up? I'm happy for you. This dead pig is not afraid of boiling water made her powerless, and then she began to let the system replay last night's video. After watching the video, she was silent for a long time. So, what 101 times, in fact, it was just a kiss. And this kiss only increased the favorability by 5 points. Wei Bai counted the time and felt that with this slow speed, it was estimated that 3 months would be up, and she would not be able to make Shang Xiyu's favorability rise to 50. While thinking, she drew absent-mindedly. When she realized that there was someone next to her, she looked back and immediately saluted Emperor. Shang Xiyu glanced at her lips. There were still traces of him biting her lips last night after he had acted rashly. He suppressed the restlessness in his heart and glanced at the picture she drew. My beloved concubine's painting is also strange. Shang Xiyu looked at the yellow, unknown object in the painting. He really couldn't say any words of praise. When Wei Bai heard it, she immediately picked up the paper happily. Is what the emperor said true? This concubine has been drawing all morning. This tiger looks good. Although it is not as powerful as the emperor's, it is also a rare masterpiece of this concubine. Tiger? Shang Xiyu reluctantly praised. You draw very well. There is a lot of room for improvement. Wei Bai saw that Shang Xiyu's words were insincere, and the joy in her eyes dimmed. This concubine knows that she has no talent, but she still wants to follow the emperor. Did she start learning to draw because of him? Shang Xiyu's heart softened. Which woman in the harem simply wanted to learn something for him? It was all for power and wealth. Ding. The male lead's favorability is at 32. Her favorability increased by 2. Such a stingy and shabby favorability made Wei Wei Bai really want to slap Shang Siyu, this stingy man. The system held back for a long time, and finally couldn't help but say, "You're obviously drawing Pikachu." Wei Wei Bai replied calmly, "Yeah, what do you want? I'm just that innocent, pure, and childlike. I just like Pokemon. Why don't you come and scold me?" System. The host is so self-righteous, yet you don't even dare to retort? What should I do? Wei Wei Bai finished painting. When she was washing her hands, she ordered someone to send some flower food over. Today was the flower festival. It was a festival unique to this dynasty. It was said that it was the most beautiful day of the year, so it was celebrated as a festival. Flower food was food made from flowers. Elvile and Hong Xiu served up a bowl of fresh flower porridge, which was especially delicious. Shang Siyu was very cautious about food. He almost didn't eat the food handed over by other concubines. But when he saw that it was Wei Wei Bai who handed it over, he didn't have any precautions and accompanied her to eat a bowl. Wei Wei Bai saw that he ate and was very happy. She said, "It's great. When I was at home, my mother and father would always eat flower food on the day of the flower festival. At night, they would go to see the lanterns and then make a flower wish. My mother said that she and my father met at the flower festival. / button. Chapter 62. The Flower Fairy Festival had another function, which was that men and women could go out to play on this day. Naturally, after a long time, it would become a blind date. Bai Weiwei's tone carried the affection of a child towards her parents, as well as her love for the Flower Fairy Festival. Shang Siyu's eyebrows slightly wrinkled. He knew that the Qin Fei should have felt his cold attitude and knew that she would start to deal with Wei Wei Bai's parents. As for him, he could only watch from the sidelines and even allow those things to happen. He didn't dare to imagine what Wei Wei Bai's expression would be when she knew that something had happened to her parents. Shang Siyu suddenly found himself weak and didn't dare to imagine the future between him and her. When he came out of Wei Wei Bai's place, the head eunuch whispered, "When the lanterns start to be lit tonight, the Qin family will hold a large-scale lantern appreciation party next to the canal, and most of them will use royal lanterns." Royal lanterns were the lanterns that only the royal family was qualified to enjoy. The Chen family was one of the 4 major families, and their power was the weakest, but they dared to challenge the royal authority. Shang Siyu's eyes flashed with a cold light, and he said to the head eunuch, "Then starting tonight, raise the butcher's knife." Wei Wei Bai thought that she could only attack until here today. In the evening, she had nothing to do, so she started to do needlework. After all, she was dressed as an ancient person, so she had to pretend a little. Wei Wei Bai was embroidering halfway when Hong Xiu came in to cut the candles to make the lights brighter. "Master, it's late. Embroidery is not good for the eyes." Wei Wei Bai bowed her head and smiled softly. "It's okay. I just want to embroider a sachet for the emperor." She just said it casually. In fact, she only knew how to do cross-stitch, and her embroidery was not very good. "The male lead is here, just outside the window. He flew here." He flew here? Qinggong? Damn, I'm so excited. There's actually Qinggong. Wei Wei Bai calmly continued to embroider her flowers. As expected, Hong Xiu continued, "Mistress, what are you embroidering? This is very peculiar." Wei Wei Bai smiled shyly. "Today is the Flower Fairy Festival. What I embroidered is a mythical beast that protects the Flower Fairy Festival. It protects love." When Hong Xiu heard this, how could she not understand her thoughts? However, the emperor was heartless. How could Wei Wei Bai's love be reciprocated? Furthermore, this divine beast was a little too ugly. The system tried its best to hold back, but in the end, it couldn't hold it in anymore. "You embroidered. This blue head, white face, and fingerless hands. Isn't that Doraemon?" Furthermore, it was so ugly that it was about to go blind. Wei Wei Bai smiled coldly. "You're so childish. You've watched all kinds of cartoons." The system almost choked. Ding. The male lead's favorability is at 35. Shang Siyu, who was secretly coming in from outside, did not expect to hear Wei Wei Bai talking to the palace maid. He stood outside in silence for a long time. His heart warmed for a moment, but he coldly suppressed it. The royal family was heartless. He was just as heartless. So he pushed the door and entered. "What is my beloved concubine doing?" Wei Wei Bai was a little panicked. Her first reaction was to hide the embroidered cloth to the side. She unnaturally greeted him. "Emperor, why are you here?" Shang Xiyu naturally took her hand. "Beloved concubine, didn't you want to see the lanterns? Tonight, let's go." Wei Wei Bai showed a surprised smile. "Is that so?" "Thank you, Your Majesty." Shang Xiyu saw her innocent smile and his chest tightened. He knew that if he took her out tonight, there would be no turning back. //record. The T. Chapter 63. Wei Wei Bai didn't know anything and immediately ran to change her clothes. Shang Xiyu took her out of the door, and in front of them was the eunuch Su De who had changed his clothes. Su De very respectfully gathered his sleeves and bowed his head, saying to them, "Emperor." "No, it's master, madam. Please come with me." Wei Wei Bai thought that Shang Xiyu would take her to jump over the wall, fly into the sky, and fly outside. As a result, they just walked out of the palace. The road was very quiet, and when the palace door opened a small door, they went out. The people in the palace also celebrated the flower festival, but it was only the imperial kitchen that arranged a table of flower food for the women above the rank of imperial concubine, and hung lanterns in the imperial garden for them to play. Wei Wei Bai was taken out of the palace by Shang Xiyu. Along the way, the lights were very bright. There were people dancing dragons, people selling things, and lanterns were hanging all over the streets. Everyone's face was full of happy smiles. There were too many people, so Shang Xiyu could only hold Wei Wei Bai's hand so as not to get lost. Several guards in the palace followed them from a distance. There was only Su De by his side. Wei Wei Bai was like a bird that had been trapped for a long time. Seeing the lively street, the joy in her eyes couldn't be suppressed. She was wearing a civilian woman's skirt, and the light pink skirt swayed in the wind. Her face was not powdered, and her hair was tied up in a simple bun with a peach blossom hairpin inserted, but she was already so beautiful that people couldn't help but stop and look at her. Shang Xiyu coldly glanced at those who dared to look at by Wei Wei and stared back. Seeing masks hanging next to the lantern stall, he picked up a rabbit mask and put it on Wei Wei Bai. After Wei Wei Bai put on the mask, she asked softly, "Does the emperor dislike this concubine for being ugly and scaring people?" Shang Xiyu was stunned and realized Wei Wei Bai's strange aesthetic. He didn't allow her to put on those scary powders, so she had always been bare-faced. For Wei Wei Bai, it was really difficult for her to show her ugly face. Ding. The male lead's favorability is at 36. Favorability has increased by 1. I have never seen a man who is so stingy with his favorability. Wei Wei Bai's mouth twitched as she silently gave the system 10,000 likes. Shang Xiyu took a tiger mask and put it on. "I am as ugly as you, so let's wear a mask together." This was a disguised form of praise that was so shameless. Shang Xiyu and Wei Wei Bai wore masks to see the lanterns. Su De silently paid the bill behind him. Most of the lanterns in the flower festival were in the shape of fresh flowers. Each of them looked like a blooming flower floating in the night sky. One would feel lost in them. Bai Weiwei suddenly saw that there was a stall selling red paper, and she immediately took Shang Xiyu to buy the paper. After buying the paper, she said to Shang Xiyu, "Write the wish on the paper, then put it on the floating water lantern. Let the paper float with the lantern to the place of the gods in the distance, then the wish can be fulfilled." Shang Xiyu felt that these little girls' ravings were somewhat unreliable, but looking at Wei Wei Bai's serious eyes, he could only accompany her nonsense. Wei Wei Bai wrote the wish and ran to the riverside. She put the floating water lantern on the water and put the paper inside. Shang Xiyu was curious for a moment. "What did you write?" Wei Wei Bai put her hands behind her back. Her eyes were full of smiles as she asked slyly, "Do you want to know? If you want to exchange my secret, there are conditions." It was the first time that Shang Xiyu saw Wei Wei Bai being so bold. It seemed that after leaving the palace, her character became lively. He asked flatly, "What do you want?" //. Chapter 64. In this world, what else could he not give? Wei Wei Bai suddenly looked around and found that no one was coming here. She rushed to Shang Siyu in a few steps, reached out and took off his mask, revealing the indifferent handsome face inside. She took off her mask, stood on tiptoe, and planted a heavy kiss on his cheek. Shang Siyu was caught off guard and suddenly took a few steps back. Wei Wei Bai had put on her mask and said with a smile, "Whose family's young master is like jade," making this concubine toss and turn, seeking him at night. The love in these words was strong and sincere. Shang Siyu only felt that his heart was beating violently, and the cold passion after leaving the battlefield was aroused. He wanted to open his mouth to say something, but his tongue was dry, and all the words were stuck in his throat, making it sour and unbearable. Bai Weiwei turned her head to look at the floating water lantern. The wind blew, causing her clothes to flutter. Her voice was sweet and serious. This concubine has 3 wishes in her life. First, this country will always be prosperous, barbarians will not invade, and all sides will come to congratulate. Second, your majesty will be safe and worry-free. Everything will go smoothly and live a long life. Shang Siyu thought that Wei Wei Bai was just a silly and very simple woman. As a result, her words opened his heart. The pain in his heart was not because he couldn't protect this country. He didn't expect that she could understand him, and the wishes were for him. Shang Siyu almost didn't dare to open his mouth and ask what her third wish was. For the first time, he felt that he might not be able to give her what she wanted. Wei Wei Bai didn't embarrass him and still softly said, "What is this third wish?" This concubine is afraid that if I ask for too much, God will not listen to this concubine, so I won't say it. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 40. 45. Wei Wei Bai felt that this time, the increase in favorability was like a man's. Shang Siyu was silent for a few seconds before saying, "Come here." Wei Wei Bai was puzzled, but still walked to his side. Shang Siyu had already squatted down. "Get on my back." Wei Wei Bai was a little surprised and said awkwardly, "That's not appropriate." Shang Siyu coldly snorted, "You were so bold just now. How come you don't think it's inappropriate? This is an imperial edict." Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Yes, your majesty." After Shang Siyu carried her on his back, he exerted his strength under his feet and flew up the continuous eaves. Wei Wei Bai was stunned. Was there really someone who could fly? She excitedly said to the system, "I'm flying, I'm flying." The system was disdainful. "Country bumpkin." Shang Siyu's qinggong was very good. He carried Wei Wei Bai to the highest point. Beneath their feet, the lanterns were resplendent and golden. People were coming and going, and one could see how lively and flourishing this flourishing age was. He felt the gentleness of the woman behind him, but he didn't have any evil thoughts. He was only touched. Wei Wei Bai looked at everything under her feet and couldn't help but exclaim, "So beautiful." Shang Siyu couldn't help but show a sincere smile, and the cold expression on his face softened. It was as if Wei Wei Bai was praising him, and there was even a trace of childishness in his eyes. "This is Zhan's country. Is it as my beloved concubine wishes, a flourishing age?" The woman behind him didn't answer, but Shang Siyu suddenly felt a gentle kiss on his head. He returned to his childhood, that difficult time with his concubine mother's company. If there is someone in this world who is willing to kiss your head and caress your hair, then this person is the most gentle person in the world to you, and the person who loves you the most. // T. Chapter 65. At that time, only his consort mother kissed his head and stroked his hair. But when he grew up, he returned bathed in blood and ascended the throne as an emperor, but no one treated him gently anymore. When he did well, no one praised him. When he did wrong, no one comforted him. The coldness in Shang Siyu's eyes disappeared, and a drop of tear slowly flowed out and dripped into the darkness. Suddenly, someone set off fireworks in the distance, where the Chun family's lantern festival was. Shang Siyu knew that this was a signal to get ready. Wei Wei Bai saw the fireworks and immediately watched them with relish. She was so big, but this was the first time she was being carried to a high place to watch the fireworks. Shang Siyu's voice was a bit dry. "Are you tired? Let's go down." Wei Wei Bai felt that it was a pity. She wanted to see more scenery, but considering that Shang Xiyu was carrying a big living person and had to perform magical lightness kung fu, she could understand that his physical strength was not enough. Shang Xiyu flew to the place where the Qin family held the Lantern Festival and put Wei Wei Bai down. He looked up and saw that in the center of the Lantern Festival, there was a huge lotus lantern. The size and the effect of the lantern were all imperial lanterns. Shang Xiyu's eyes were cold, and the murderous intent in his heart could hardly be suppressed. He took out a small red silk flower from his arms and pinned it on Wei Wei Bai's hair bun. He also took away her mask, revealing her beautiful face. "You wait for me here. I'll go buy some food," Shang Xiyu said. Wei Wei Bai showed a trusting smile. "I'll wait for you, husband." Husband? Shang Xiyu felt that this word, husband, was crashing into his heart. His eyes were slightly hot, and he almost turned his head and walked away. His footsteps were fast as if he was afraid that he would regret it. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 50. The system was moved. The favorability is finally not stagnant. Wei Wei Bai looked serious. "No. How could Shang Xiyu be so kind to take me to see the lanterns? This guy's brain is not good. He's just a block of wood. How could he be so romantic? It seems that Shang Xiyu is going to do it." Just as she finished speaking, an extremely frivolous voice sounded. "Yo, where did this beauty come from? Give me a kiss." This sounded like the opening statement of a cannon fodder. Wei Wei Bai snorted coldly. When she turned around, she was so scared that she almost ran back to the palace. The person in front of him had a face full of pimples, a flat nose, pea eyes, pig lips, and a body as round as a toad weighing 300 pounds. Who was this person? This was so ugly that it was beyond her imagination. Wei Wei Bai hadn't forgotten her role. She panicked. "Who are you? Why are you flirting with an innocent girl in the middle of the street? Even if you look like Panin, you can't use your handsome face to flirt with others." The boar toad-like cannon fodder with pimples on their faces were shocked. "He looks like Panin? He was handsome?" The system was shocked. "This is the first time I've seen such a clear-headed and refined host." Shang Xiyu, Suda, and a group of shadow guards who were hiding in the dark far away were also shocked. Shang Xiyu remembered Wei Wei Bai's strange illness. What was ugly was beautiful. What was beautiful was ugly. It turned out that the man she loved, the man who looked like Panin in her eyes, looked like this. In this way, he wouldn't be able to meet her standards for a lifetime. Jealousy made Shang Xiyu's face slightly distorted. The toad-like cannon fodder was excited. "You are simply my confidant. I want to marry you and bring you home. I am the young master of the Qin family, Chen Pao Hui. My father is the prime minister. My family has been an official for generations. We are a scholarly family." Cannon fodder. Collect button below to record this reading record. Chapter 66. Wei Wei Bai was excited. This was the first time she was being molested by a bad person. She was scared. She immediately said with a serious face, "I have a husband. Please don't be so impulsive." Chen Pao Hui looked at her beautiful face. His mung bean eyes were full of lust. "Your husband is already a dead man. You should be obedient and follow me." Bai Weiwei's face was horrified. "Is there still law?" Chen Pao Hui grabbed her hand. "Our Qin family is the law. Even if I kill you, nothing will happen." Presumptuous. Wei Wei Bai slapped his ugly face. Her nails deliberately used force and fiercely scratched several marks on his face. Chen Pao Hui immediately howled. "Someone come! Someone come! Catch this woman for me!" More than a dozen servants rushed over, and a few of them carried Wei Wei Bai away without any mercy. "Bitch, you dare to hit me! I will not be surnamed Chun if I don't kill you." Chen Pao Hui roared angrily. Wei Wei Bai rolled her eyes. "CCC. Where is Shang Xiyu?" System. "Not far away. Looking at you. You are being robbed." Wei Wei Bai took a deep breath. The tears in her eyes gathered and fell down, like a pear blossom with tears. Then she cried miserably, "I have a husband. My husband is the best man in the world. He told me to wait for him to come back. You let me go?" System. "You look like a tortured cabbage." Wei Wei Bai saw that she was being carried away. and cried even more miserably, "Husband, husband, where are you?" This cry was so tragic that the Great Wall was about to collapse. Of course, the people around saw this evil act, but they didn't dare to provoke the Qin family. In the distance, Shang Xiyu was furious. His eyes were bloodshot, especially when he heard Wei Wei by calling him. He almost couldn't control his emotions and wanted to rush over. Suda worriedly said from the side, "Your Majesty." Shang Xiyu was full of hatred as he looked in front of him. His fingers were clenched into fists as he clenched his teeth and closed his eyes. "It's not time yet. We have to wait for that old man to come out so we can catch them all in one fell swoop." Just as Wei Wei Bai was taken to the largest restaurant nearby, she saw an extremely sinister middle-aged man coming over. "Father," Chen Paohui immediately called out. "Today is the day I'm hosting a banquet for all the big shots. What are you doing?" Chen Chengqing asked coldly. Chen Paohui was also afraid of his father. When he suddenly saw the small red silk flower on Wei Wei Bai's head, he immediately said excitedly, "Father, this is the female slave who escaped from me. Didn't I let my female slave wear a red silk flower today? Look at her head." Wei Wei Bai realized why Shang Xiyu put a flower on her. It turned out that it was not a romantic move, but to make others think that she was an escaped slave. There were many people from the Qin family here. Even without Qin Paohui, there would be people from the Qin family coming to catch her if she stood there for too long. His mind was gloomy and ruthless enough. Was this Shang Xiyu? Chun Chengqing coldly snorted. "Get out of here when you're caught." Chun Paohui happily said yes, and then let people carry Wei Wei Bai upstairs. "Wei Wei Bai, system, do you think that if I jump off the building to protect my chastity, Shang Xiyu, that heartless person, will his favorability increase?" "System, jump and you'll know." Wei Wei Bai, the system's degree of ruthlessness is the same as Shang Xiyu's. It seems that the system and Shang Xiyu, these two heartless men, can't be counted on. Chun Paohui's face was evil. He pushed her into the restaurant, and then stretched out his pig's foot, wanting to press this stunning beauty on the bed. // The download address is at https://www.sashu.com. Collection below to record this reading record. Ooh. Chapter 67. Don't come over. I'm going to shout for help. Wei Wei Bai pulled out the peach blossom hairpin in her hair in horror and pointed it at Chen Paohui. Chen Paohui laughed lewdly. "You can shout, shout. Shout until your throat breaks. No one will save you." Wei Wei Bai, system, can't you change this outdated cannon fodder line? And what I like most is to hear a beauty's voice in bed. Chen Paohui laughed and said, and was about to pounce on Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai immediately drilled under the table. The fat toad-like Chen Paohui stretched out his chubby hand to grab her, but was pricked by her hairpin. Chen Paohui immediately held his chubby hand and cried out in pain. Then his face turned ferocious. "Come out? If you ask me to come out, I will come out. Who do you think you are?" Wei Wei Bai bent over and squatted, calmly taking out a handkerchief to wipe the blood on the hairpin. She liked this hairpin very much, but the result was that it was fed to a pig, and she didn't want to wear it in the future. Chen Paohui excitedly said, "I am the young master of the Qin family, Chen Paohui. My father is the prime minister, and my family has been officials for generations. We are a scholarly family." Wei Wei Bai, did the author only set this line for him? Even if he was a cannon fodder, he shouldn't be so brainless. Wei Wei Bai spat. "You are just a young master of the Chen family. There are so many young masters in the Chen family. Who do you think you are? This old lady is the emperor's woman." Chen Paohui was also anxious. His brain wasn't good since he was a child. He was afraid that his brothers would chase him away. "You are just the emperor's woman. The emperor has so many women. Then who do you think you are?" Wei Wei Bai knocked on the system. Is this guy brainless? Shouldn't the average person kneel down and tremble when they hear themselves flirting with the emperor's woman? Although the power of the imperial court was great, it did not mean that Shang Xiyu was a good person. The system said, "If it's a cannon fodder, then don't be so calculative. Don't tell me you want a cannon fodder that's as handsome as the moon, Handsome and tall as well as smart enough to fly into the sky and fly into the ground? Is that okay with the second male lead? Wei Wei Bai, the system makes a lot of sense. I have nothing to say to that. Actually, we can have a few dozen more of these second male leads. Just as Wei Wei Bai and Fat Toad were dealing with each other with ease, Shang Xiyu gradually felt the process of his heart dying as time passed. He knew that if he wanted to have a good reason for his actions, it wasn't enough for Wei Wei Bai to simply be captured. She had to be humiliated. This kind of reason was enough for him to kill the entire Chen family and prevent the other three families from rebelling for the time being. But when he thought of Wei Wei Bai being pressed down by another man, he wanted to kill someone, massacre the city, and destroy everything. Take action. He bit the word so hard that it almost bled. The head eunuch still wanted to dissuade him. Time is too short, as you command. He quickly bowed his head and his body trembled. He didn't dare to look at Shang Xiyu's bloodshot and angry eyes. The guards who were already prepared came out in full force. Shang Xiyu directly pulled out his sword and rushed to the restaurant with a murderous look on his face. In the restaurant, Chen Paohui flew into a rage out of humiliation. You think I'm ugly? I'll crush you to death. Wei Wei Bai was forced into a corner by him, but her face was cold and bored. Her mouth continued to attack. Oh, you also know that you have no human rights when you're fat and ugly. Even dogs dislike you when you go out. Your father vomits when he sees you. Your mother cries when she sees you. No one loved you when you were young, and you became a pervert when you were 3. When you were 4, you stole people's underwear. When you were 5, you peeked at women bathing. When you were 6, you scared your maid to death. When you were 7, all living things within a kilometer of you were extinct. Now it's even better. When you go out, birds fly away and the world is destroyed. System. This is too cruel. Fast crossing system. Prince Charming, come here, /fast crossing system. Prince Charming, come here, // fast crossing system. Prince Charming, come here. Download fast crossing system. Prince Charming, come here, fast crossing system. Prince Charming, come here. Chapter 68. Chen Paohui felt like his heart was breaking into pieces. Every sentence hit the nail on the head. So sad. Didn't you say that I'm handsome? 2 lines of desolate tears slowly fell from Chen Paohui's eyes. Wei Wei Bai frowned and looked at him, then said disdainfully, You believe what others say. Don't you have any self-awareness? If you're ugly, you should study more. Chen Paohui, will I be handsome if I study more? Wei Wei Bai, no. You spend all your time studying. You don't have to go out and scare people. Verbal attack, critical hit multiple times. The male lead is here. The system's voice sounded, and Wei Wei Bai breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, she could not look at Chen Paohui's ugly face. Chen Paohui then remembered that he was here to be molested, not to be scolded. He felt that he could not be led astray by this woman again. He tore open his collar and shouted, I'm molesting you. Wei Wei Bai straightened her expression, cleared her throat, and then screamed in despair, Don't come over. I'll die in front of you. This scream was so mournful and terrifying that Chen Paohui was almost scared out of his wits. Wei Wei Bai screamed, Don't come over, and began to desperately mess up her clean bun with her hands, making it look like a mess of weeds. She cried, Don't, my husband will save me, while tearing open her coat, revealing the white underwear inside. Chen Paohui was stunned as he watched Wei Wei Bai become a drama queen, directing and acting herself. Damn, I haven't done anything yet. Wei Wei Bai was afraid that it was not realistic enough, so she fiercely pinched her exposed neck. Very good. It turned red, like a miserable appearance of being humiliated. Then she put the peach blossom hairpin in her hand to her neck and cried resolutely, Beast, I won't let you get away with it even if I die. Chen Paohui. His brain is not enough to process this situation. This woman has done everything that should be done. What should he do next? But before he could do anything, the door was kicked open. Shang Xiyu, who entered the door, saw Wei Wei Bai being humiliated by an ugly fat man in the corner, and his heart broke. Let her go. Shang Xiyu coldly opened his mouth, carrying the blood-stained sword like a grim reaper, approaching step by step. Although Qin Pao Hui was stupid, as a disciple of the Qin family, he had seen the emperor before. His legs went soft, and he fell to the ground. Why, your majesty? I didn't do anything. He really didn't do anything. He wasn't the one who messed up her hair, tore her clothes, and took the hairpin. When Shang Xiyu saw the scene just now, how could he still be rational? The long sword in his hand slashed, and Chun Pao Hui's fat head flew out, blood gushing out from his neck. Wei Bai and the system turned white at the same time. So cruel. After Shang Xiyu killed Qin Pao Hui, his mood was not relieved at all. He saw Wei Bai huddled in the corner with fear. Her beautiful face was pale, her eyes were full of tears of despair, her clothes were messy, and the marks on her neck were. Shang Xiyu's eyes were red, and his voice trembled a little. It's okay, I'll save you. He took off his robe and wrapped it around her trembling body. Then he held her in his arms, as if he was holding his most precious treasure. He was reluctant to crush her with a little strength. Bai Weiwei silently curled up in his arms. She didn't say anything, but her hands were firmly gripping the clothes on his chest. As if he knew her fear, Shang Xiyu choked and pretended to be calm to comfort her. Don't be afraid. After a long time, the woman in his arms cried, This concubine is not afraid. I know you will come to save me, T. Chapter 69. Saying that you're not afraid, this concubine and I are confused. Shang Xiyu thought of the scene just now and knew that if he came a moment later, that beast would have succeeded. He hugged her harder. His eyes were gloomy and angry. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 60. Downstairs, Wei Bai looked out and saw the whole restaurant's people kneeling on the ground. Chen Chengsheng was kneeling in front. He didn't know that his son had been killed. His face didn't even show much fear. I didn't know that the emperor would arrive. This humble subject is disrespectful in front of the emperor and deserves to die. Shang Xiyu looked at them coldly. Suddenly his expression was gloomy. You are guilty. But do you know what your good son did? Chen Chengsheng had already guessed it. After all, the reason for this group of murderous guards to rush in was that a Zhao Yi in the palace was missing. It was said that it was his stupid son who kidnapped her. It was said that there was a Zhao Yi in the palace who was favored overnight. She was as beautiful as a fairy. It seemed that she was the woman who was carried upstairs by his son. It was no wonder that Shang Xiyu just came in with a sword and killed the two servants guarding the door as soon as he opened the door. For the sake of a woman, it seemed that the emperor's brain was not very good. Chen Chengsheng said without fear, My son disturbed your majesty. It is my son's fault. This humble subject will strictly discipline him. Shang Xiyu sneered. Discipline? Well, that beast has just gone to see the king of hell. If you want to discipline him, then go and discipline him. When Chen Chengsheng heard this, his courage was broken. His son was dead. Your majesty, for a mere Zhao Yi, you killed a loyal subject's child. If the late emperor knew in the underworld, he would have taught you a lesson. Shang Xiyu was holding Wei Bai. He could feel that when she heard this sentence, her body was stiff and she seemed to be very scared. In his brain, the string of reason broke. At this moment, he could hardly remember his purpose. His killing intent made him violent and ferocious. You said a mere Zhao Yi, but my beloved concubine is just a Zhao Yi. It's too unfair. Starting today, by Zhao Yi will be conferred the title of imperial concubine. The position of the empress is vacant. The phoenix seal will be temporarily held by the imperial concubine, and she will decide all matters in the harem. The son of the Chen misbehaved towards the imperial concubine, beheaded. The Chen family's Zongzi committed a crime. His entire family will be executed, and his 3 generations will be exterminated. Shang Xiyu's eyes were full of anger. His expression was gloomy and cold as he slowly said the last sentence. Those who offend me can be forgiven. Imperial concubine, and die without a burial place. Chen Chengsheng's face was deathly pale. He angrily said in horror, This is against the law. Your Majesty, you will be punished by the heavens if you destroy my family. Ked. After that, Shang Xiyu turned and left. He didn't want Bai Weiwei to see a more bloody scene. Shang Xiyu carried Wei Wei Bai all the way back to the palace. Along the way, Wei Wei Bai was silent. She didn't cry or make a fuss. Her eyes were empty and drifting. Shang Xiyu didn't even dare to ask her how she had been humiliated. He was guilty and timid. He didn't expect that this kind of cowardly emotion would appear in him. After returning to the palace, Wei Wei Bai's first sentence was, "Emperor, this concubine wants to take a bath." Shang Xiyu felt his heart hurt so much. He could only put her down and then said, "You are the imperial concubine. You don't need to call yourself a concubine." / record. Chapter 70. Concubines and above are called concubines. When Wei Wei Bai heard this sentence, she couldn't help but laugh at herself, but there was no trace of a smile in her eyes. Then she took off the red silk flower on her head and put it on the table. "This flower will be returned to the emperor. This concubine is lowly and dirty, not worthy of this flower." When Shang Xiyu heard this, his heart trembled and he couldn't help but take a step back. Wei Wei Bai finished and left. When she arrived at the bathing place, she looked haggard and indifferently said to the palace maids around her, "Leave." When the people left, the despair on Wei Wei Bai's face disappeared, and she looked around furtively. "No one is here." System. No one is here if you are not a person. Wei Wei Bai didn't bother to bicker with the system. She immediately took off her clothes, then stretched out her fingers and pinched her arms, shoulders, and chest a few times. After a while, the places on her body that should be red were red, and some of them could even see the blood from her fingernails. Red, purple, green, and green. It was miserable and miserable. Anyway, it was as miserable as it could be. The system looked at the host's work. It was really speechless. When Wei Wei Bai felt that it was almost time, she jumped into the pool naked and stretched out her hands to hug herself. She looked up and remembered the tragic Korean dramas she had watched in those years, where the vicious supporting female lead tortured the female lead to death. The female lead had leukemia, the male lead had amnesia, and so on. Her mood brewed. Her face was full of despair and misery, and she cried fiercely. Her crying was suppressed, and her sobs made people feel sad and unbearable. Shang Xiyu, who was guarding outside, heard her suppressed crying and felt like his heart was being cut by a knife. He immediately rushed in and saw Wei Wei Bai with her back to him, and there were traces of being scratched. Knowing was one thing, seeing was another. He thought that for the sake of the country, he could sacrifice anything. But it was just a woman. He liked. Her crying was so painful. Even if she suffered this kind of humiliation, she couldn't resist. The only thing she could do was to hide and cry helplessly. For the first time, Shang Xiyu knew what it meant to feel as if a knife was being twisted in his heart and what it meant to be torn apart. He slowly reached out his hand, wanting to touch her and pull her into his embrace to protect her. But halfway through, his expression turned sad. Did he still have the right to do so? What he gave her was not protection, but harm. Wei Wei Bai seemed to have just realized that there was someone behind her. She turned around in horror and dodged to the side before she could see who it was. "Who is it? Don't come over." He was like a bird startled by the twang of a bough. Shang Xiyu's voice was hoarse. "It's me." When Wei Wei Bai saw who it was, she immediately wiped her tears with all her might. In the end, she couldn't wipe them clean and could only cover her face with her hands. She sobbed and said, This concubine has been disrespectful. Shang Xiyu knew that she was afraid. Which woman wouldn't be afraid after experiencing those things? He took off his clothes and entered the water. He reached out and slowly hugged her trembling body. "Don't be afraid, don't be afraid." After that, Shang Xiyu bowed his head and slowly blew a breath on the red mark on her chest. Wei Wei Bai's body stiffened, and she almost pushed him away. Shang Xiyu's voice was gentle. "When I was a child, every time I was hurt, my mother also blew on my wound like this, and then I didn't feel any pain. When he was a child, he was always beaten and bullied, but as long as his mother did this, he didn't feel any pain at all, because he knew that someone loved him." Chapter 71. Wei Wei Bai didn't dare to move. He gently blew on the wounds. It was even more illegal than kissing. Wei Wei Bai's face turned red. It was so itchy. She sensitively curled up her toes and endured it very hard. If she laughed out loud, she would probably be pulled out by Shang Xiyu. To divert her attention, she could only look at his body. But she found that his body was full of wounds. There were whip marks, burns, knife wounds, axe wounds. Wei Wei Bai was shocked. How did he survive with so many wounds? There wasn't a single inch of skin on his body that wasn't damaged. It looked so ghastly that people couldn't look straight at it. Compared to the scratches she made herself, his was a real wound. The tears in Wei Wei Bai's eyes fell again. She reached out and slowly stroked the wounds. Are you in pain? Shang Xiyu's movements paused. Her gentle and sorrowful tone made his heart sweet. Obviously, what he hated most in his life was other people's sympathetic and pitiful eyes. But when he met Wei Wei Bai, he knew that there was a person in this world whose compassion could heal the scars in his heart. Shang Xiyu gently said, "It doesn't hurt, it's all over." Ding. The male lead's favorability is at 65. Wei Wei Bai reluctantly pulled out a smile. I don't hurt, so I asked the emperor not to worry. It's just that I have been humiliated. It's not suitable for me to stay in the palace anymore. I asked the emperor to give me a piece of white silk. Let me kill myself to show my innocence. Shang Xiyu's eyes flashed with a trace of pain. He gritted his teeth and angrily said, I'm here. Don't even think about dying. Wei Wei Bai had nothing left to live for. Then I asked the emperor to let me shave my hair and become a nun. Shang Xiyu angrily said, Do you want me to tear down all the temples? Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but feel wronged. You don't allow me to do anything. You are the emperor. You are right. This little girl's mood was obviously so sad, but she was so charming. Just now, he was afraid that her temperament would change drastically after the incident. Fortunately, she was still that silly girl. Shang Xiyu looked at the marks on her body. The more he looked, the more irksome it was. If you can't forget this, then I will make you forget. After saying that, he suddenly pushed her into the water. Wei Wei Bai was stunned. She was fine just now, but now she was going to drown? Fuck, can't this be fun? The next second, Shang Xiyu also lowered his head into the water, sealed her trembling lips, and fiercely nibbled on them. Wei Wei Bai couldn't breathe, so she could only open her lips weakly. His tongue was like a sword, ruthlessly piercing into her mouth and tangling with hers. The moist and intense kiss and the suffocating and painful imprisonment made Wei Wei Bai fall into a strange blankness. She couldn't dodge or struggle. Shang Xiyu's strong body was like an iron cage that tightly bound her, depriving her of the right to breathe. The only thing she felt was the smooth touch between their lips and teeth. When Shang Xiyu took her out of the water, Wei Wei Bai felt that her whole soul had left her body. She thought that this was the limit, but when Shang Xiyu pressed her whole body to the edge of the pool and began to kiss the marks on her body, she found out that she had played too much. Shang Xiyu, this beast, actually intended to force himself on her. Chapter 72. Wei Wei Bai, 004, Help. The system was so happy that it flew up. Keep doing it, keep doing it. Let's see how you can do it. Wei Wei Bai, adding insult to injury to this point. Does she really not have any old hatred with the system? Shang Xiyu kissed the marks on her body that were insulted by others. It was so heavy that it was as if he wanted to bite off a piece of her flesh. Wei Wei Bai gasped, Your Majesty, what are you doing? Shang Xiyu paused for a moment before he looked up. His eyes were full of violent and hot flames. Zhen will help you wash away the marks left by others on your body. I will make you forget any man. From today onwards, the only man you can remember is me. What a beast. He wanted to force himself on her, yet he still said it in such a dignified manner. Shang Xiyu picked her up from the water. His hair had long been scattered, some curly hair hanging down, rubbing against Wei Wei Bai's snow-white skin, making her skin tremble. When he saw this picture, his eyes were dark and hungry. His long legs stretched out of the pool. Beside the pool, under the floating gauze curtain, there was a large recliner. He pressed Bai Wei Wei into a chair. His exposed muscles had a kind of explosive beauty. Shadows were cast on his handsome face, and there was a kind of dissatisfaction of choosing people to devour. Wei Wei Bai shivered. It was so scary. She reached out instinctively to resist him, but her hand was tightly held. Shang Siyu's voice was dark and hoarse. Don't be afraid. I will be gentle. Gentle? He was going to press her into a dry green bean. How was he gentle? Wei Wei Bai struggled to ask the system for help. Can you make this guy impotent? The system was very firm. You can sacrifice yourself. Everything is for the sake of favorability. Wei Wei Bai. For the sake of favorability, this system is so crazy to sell its host for glory. Why is there no justice to clean up such a heartless system? Shang Siyu was so close to a woman's body for the first time. Her snow-white skin was unbelievably delicate. His rough palm was full of sword calluses, and he was worried that he might cut her. Her long black hair was disheveled yet beautifully scattered on her body. The strong contrast between black and white was breathtakingly beautiful. When she raised her confused and moist eyes to look at him, he instinctively felt his back go numb, and his entire body seemed to have fallen into a violent and intense tremor. Shang Siyu hugged her and stroked her body. His nose rubbed against her sensitive neck. You smell so good. It was fragrant like a flower, but fragile enough to tempt him into madness. This sentence was like some kind of terrible attack. Wei Wei Bai's face instantly turned pale. She suddenly turned her head and trembled in fear. She reached out and desperately patted Shang Siyu. I don't want to. Don't come over. Don't come over. I'm not good. Not good at all. Shang Siyu was shocked and quickly stopped his movements. He could see that Wei Wei Bai was really scared. Wei Wei. He tried to call her again and again. Wei Wei, Wei Wei. Although she was very nervous just now, there was obviously no fear. Wei Wei Bai seemed to wake up. She looked at Shang Siyu in a daze. The Emperor? Her eyes were terrifyingly empty, and tears slowly flowed out as if she had been hit hard. That beast also said that I taste good. I said that I'm not good. I asked him to let me go, but he kept coming over, coming over. She couldn't go on. It seemed that she was thinking of that terrifying scene. Fast crossing system. Prince Charming, come over here. Fast crossing system. Prince Charming, come over here. / fast crossing system. Prince Charming, come over here. Fast crossing system. Prince Charming, come over here. Collection below to record the reading record of this time. Chapter 72 Emperor 26. The fast crossing system. Prince Charming, come over here. Chapter 73. When Shang Siyu heard this, his heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. He suddenly felt that he was just like that beast, causing her to be so afraid of him. Wei Wei Bai suddenly reached out and hugged him, buried her face in his bare chest, and cried out loud. It was not the kind of heartbreaking crying just now. Instead, it was a cry of pain that came from the relief of surviving a calamity. This cry made Shang Siyu's eyes wet, and he almost lost his voice. It's okay. I killed him. He can't touch you anymore. Wei Wei Bai couldn't care about anything else. She hugged Shang Siyu's wet body and cried until the sky fell and the earth cracked. In the end, she was tired from crying, and unexpectedly fell asleep on his body with tears on her face. Shang Siyu's heart was completely softened by Wei Wei Bai's crying, and he kept stroking her back to comfort her. But there was no evil thought. It was just pure comfort. When she fell asleep, he saw her face full of tears, but he didn't think it was indecent or ugly, and personally wiped her face and body clean. Then he put on clothes for her, wrapped her up tightly, and carried her back to the bed. All the servants in the hall were driven out, for fear of disturbing Wei Wei Bai. The head eunuch stayed on the side and watched his emperor tenderly cover Wei Wei Bai with a quilt, and then he personally stayed by the bed and watched. The head eunuch just glanced at it and didn't dare to look up again. When someone outside the hall came to report, the head eunuch bowed and told Shang Siyu. When Shang Siyu heard this, the gentleness in his eyes disappeared, leaving only a gloomy killing intent. It seems that the rest of the bastards can't stay. I'll go and see. The Chen family was exterminated. How could the rest of the people not even let out a fart? Shang Siyu just got up, but he was reluctant to walk a few laps around the bed. He didn't dare to kiss the sleeping Wei Wei Bai's face before he was willing to go out with the head eunuch. Ding. The male lead's favorability has increased to 70. System. This mysterious increase in favorability, this host is truly a heaven-defying one. Was the world moving too fast, or was it getting old? Wei Wei Bai waited until Shang Xiyu left before she opened her eyes. She lamented, "It's only 70. I cried until I lost my integrity. Hee. Wei Wei Bai, but I didn't need to sell my body to gain so many favorability points. Hee. I'm really too beautiful. People can't help but love me." The system suddenly said, "You taste so good." Wei Wei Bai had a narcissistic look on her face. "Of course. Even the beauty tastes good." The system said, "It's as good as braised pork trotters." Wei Wei Bai, by the way, this plane doesn't seem to have any side quests. Wei Wei Bai sighed. The system fell silent. Wei Wei Bai also fell silent. Then, the system said timidly, "I think so." Wei Wei Bai's face turned ferocious. "Don't tell me you were pregnant from the beginning. Did you forget to tell me?" The system said, "Well, there's no difference between telling you now and telling you at the beginning. I was trying my best to help you complete the mission, so I was too busy and missed this little side quest." Wei Wei Bai gritted her teeth and said, "What side quest?" The system immediately said, "Let Shang Xiyu successfully destroy the 4 great clans, and then create a new dynasty." What a big little side quest. The system said, "Actually, the side quest doesn't have to be completed." Wei Wei Bai angrily replied, "Complete. It must be completed. How can the side quest not be completed? Even if I have to sell my life, I have to complete it." System, damn, the host has a good work attitude. I'm a bit moved. Download the at https://m-sashu. Com quick. Chapter 74. System, damn, the host has a good work attitude. I'm a bit moved. Bai Weiwei was excited. A side task can be exchanged for a stunning appearance. Then my next side task's reward might be eternal youth. I want to kill the 4 great families and send Shang Xiyu to the position of a wise emperor. The touched system was silent for a while, and finally couldn't help it. Weiwei Bai pretended to be weak and stayed in bed for 2 days. Shang Xiyu, that beast, really didn't dare to make a move on her. She didn't know if it was an illusion, but she always felt that Shang Xiyu was a virgin chicken who had just eaten a little meat, and the way he looked at her was similar to looking at a bowl of braised pork. However, Shang Xiyu was also busy, because the Chen family was slaughtered, but there was no explanation. She heard that when he went to court, there were already officials who were killed in the main hall. Incapable emperor, indiscriminately killing innocent people. For a mere demon concubine, he was muddle-headed. He must hand over the demon concubine and cut her into pieces, and give the Chen family the innocence of 100 people. She heard that since this morning, the remaining officials of the 3 great families have been kneeling outside the palace, saying that if this matter is not dealt with, they will kneel there until they die. Shang Xiyu now had only 3 choices. One was to hand her over and say that it was all because of this evil concubine that bewitched the emperor. This would give the Qin family, who had been exterminated, a reputation, and give them the title of a loyal family or something. Then, they would give some power to the other 3 great families, and this matter would be resolved. The second was to not admit it, and then one by one, clean up the remaining 3 great families in the name of spoiling the demon concubine, and kill until the blood flowed like a river. The court would definitely be turbulent, and at that time, Shang Xiyu would hypocritically say that he was guilty of spoiling a poisonous woman, killing so many loyal officials and so on. Then he would pull her to the market and kacha. No, kacha was not enough. It would take more than 3,600 cuts to vent his anger. Wait for others to vent their anger, then he could be a wise emperor again. The second was definitely the road Shang Xiyu took. Wei Wei Bai felt that Shang Xiyu could not change this route. After all, he was not really an incapable emperor. And the third one, was that Shang Xiyu was reluctant to kill her, and then people used the excuse of eradicating the incapable ruler as an excuse to rebel. When the time comes, the people everywhere will not be able to make a living. Even if Shang Xiyu can keep the throne, his vitality will be greatly damaged. Maybe the foreign tribes will attack and cause the country to perish. Even if Shang Xiyu had a hole in his brain, he couldn't do this. Shang Xiyu hurried to deal with those chores. Wei Wei Bai had already moved into his residence, and all the palace maids and eunuchs were basically gathered around her. She looked up and saw someone pouring tea for her. When his back was sore, Hong Xiu and Lu Lei would give him a gentle massage with their little fists. This was an evil feudal society. Wei Wei Bai sighed as she enjoyed the considerate service of others. And when Consort Chun led the palace maids and bodyguards over, what they saw was Wei Wei Bai lying on the chaise lounge without any manners. Beside her, there was a palace maid feeding her grapes. Consort Chin's eyes turned red and murderously said to the bodyguard she brought, "Tie this bitch up and beat her to death." Wei Wei Bai's face did not change, but her momentum was fierce. "Who dares to touch me?" The palace maids and eunuchs, who dared to touch her? Consort Chen had a lot of power and had been in the palace for a long time. She shouted, "Beat this bitch to death, and you will be rewarded with 10,000 taels of gold and 3 levels of promotion. I guarantee you a life of prosperity." Wei Wei Bai said, "I'm tempted. Can I beat myself to death?" System. "I'm tempted too. Can I beat you to death?" // to make it easier for you to read next time, you can click save. Chapter 75. The guards brought by the imperial consort were soon moved. After all, the imperial consort was very powerful, and everyone knew that she could not fall. Even if Wei Wei Bai was a new favorite, without a good background, she would soon be abandoned by the emperor. Several guards looked at each other and immediately nodded. Then they rushed over, intending to take down Wei Wei Bai first. However, the palace maids and eunuchs around Wei Wei Bai huddled together to protect the lady. What a joke! Shang Xiyu almost held Wei Wei Bai in the palm of his hand. If something happened to the lady, their heads would fall off. The imperial consort was so angry that she couldn't even speak. She pointed her finger at the palace maids and eunuchs. "Well, I will let my father kill all of you disloyal and unjust people." "Who are you saying is disloyal? Who is disloyal?" After Wei Wei Bai swallowed the last grape in her mouth, she finally had time to speak. She lazily reached out and let Hong Xiu help her up. This style, this action, laziness with nobility and elegance, made people feel that it was very pleasing to the eye. The imperial consort's face was as calm as water. "You slut. You instigated the emperor to kill a loyal minister by mistake, killing more than 100 innocent people in the Chen family. Heinous crimes are not enough to describe you. Today, I am here to enforce justice on behalf of the heavens, to let the emperor see clearly the vicious face of you witch. These people who protect you are disloyal and unjust people. They should be killed." Wei Wei Bai showed a frightened expression. "Oh, I'm so scared." The imperial consort was about to show a disdainful smile. Wei Wei Bai's expression returned to indifference in the next second. "I lied to you, old woman." "Old woman? Old woman." The imperial consort was 3 years older than Shang Xiyu. If it weren't for her family background, she wouldn't be able to enter the palace. Wei Wei Bai was only 18 years old in this world, so she must be at the tender age of a flower. The imperial consort was most afraid of people talking about her age. She was so angry that her body trembled. Wei Wei Bai reached out and touched her face. "What do you mean by disloyal and unjust? It's just that you're old and you're jealous of my youth and beauty. However, my beauty can indeed arouse the jealousy of thousands of women, so I don't blame you. After all, it's human nature." The imperial consort was so angry that she wanted to vomit blood. "You say I'm jealous of you? You only have good looks. What else do you have?" "Wei Wei Bai, is there anything more beautiful than that in this world?" Consort Chen angrily said. "None of you dare to make a move. This consort will personally beat her to death. The emperor will definitely understand my painstaking efforts." With that, Consort Chen snatched the stick from the guard's hand and rushed towards Wei Wei Bai. Who would dare to stop Consort Chen from taking action? After all, she was also the emperor's woman. Wei Wei Bai sighed. Why would a woman want to make things difficult for another woman? Then she rushed forward and avoided Consort Chin's soft stick attack. She directly reached out and grabbed Consort Chin's hair. Then she reached out and stabbed Consort Chin's eyes with her other hand. When Consort Chin screamed, Wei Wei Bai took the opportunity to lift her foot and heavily kicked between her legs. Consort Chin opened her mouth and cried out, then went limp. Wei Wei Bai's series of actions was a woman's anti-wolf technique. Stabbing eyes and flirting were a piece of cake. In the past, her body was weak, so she couldn't learn Muay Thai or Sanda. She could only learn some anti-wolf techniques. It was more than enough to deal with a pampered woman like Consort Chun. In a few moves, Consort Chun cleaned up. Wei Wei Bai coldly turned around. Next, everyone took 3 steps back in unison. The guards all tightened their legs. The eunuch's already cold lower body became even colder. Chapter 76. That kick just now was too ruthless. If a woman could be kicked down, then a man could probably ascend to heaven. Wei Wei Bai raised her hand and called Hong Xiu over to help her. A person should be elegant, their movements should be slow, and the bigger the better. Hong Xiu immediately obediently came over to support her hand. Then Wei Wei Bai looked down and coldly said to the imperial consort, As a woman, you should be more elegant. What does it look like to fight and kill all day? You said that I am not loyal and righteous, and that I am framing loyal people. I think that your breasts have grown into your brain, and you are stupid without knowing. System, your breasts have grown into your brain? Didn't you say that the imperial consort's brain was blocked and flat-chested? The imperial consort covered her eyes as she angrily glared at her with red eyes. The palace maid beside her helped her up, but she slapped the palace maid away. Then she turned around. What do you know? Do you know what I have done for the emperor? Wei Wei Bai's face became cold. When she was serious, she always had a kind of inviolable aura. What did you do? The Su, Liang, Wu, and Chen families. These 4 families are just poisonous insects entrenched in the dynasty. Wei Wei Bai coldly smiled. With a wave of her sleeve, she looked at the imperial consort like she was looking at an ant. In this world, the surname is Shang, not Su, Liang, Wu, or Chen. The dynasty has been controlled by you 4 families for many years. You have done many heartless things behind the back of the court, causing many places to be filled with resentment. What is the Chun family? They are just evil tigers that eat the wealth of the people and oppress the common people. The Chen family was destroyed because of me, but I have a clear conscience. They deserve to die and should be killed. Wei Wei Bai said word by word. In my heart, the Su family should be killed, the Wu family should be killed, and the Liang and Chen families should be killed even more. If the emperor doesn't kill them, then I will. I am not loyal and righteous. The ones who are not loyal and righteous are you people who occupy the court and look down on the imperial family. The light in Wei Wei Bai's eyes was so sharp that it could cut people's hearts. What did you do? Everything you have was given to you by the emperor. What qualifications do you have to talk about giving? At this moment, Wei Wei Bai was standing against the light, but she was still dazzling. She slowly said the last sentence. I want him to raise his butcher's knife and kill all the poisonous insects and hungry tigers in front of him. I also hope that one day, he will hold power in his hands and rule over the world. I am even more willing to use my bones, flesh, and blood to pave the way for him, so that he can walk towards a place where all people will revere him and create a prosperous dynasty. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 75. Wei Wei Bai was not moved. She turned around slowly and looked at the painting on the wall. The mountains and rivers were unbroken, and the hungry tiger was entrenched. She seemed to be talking to herself, and her tone became gentle. How is this a sacrifice? Everything that belongs to me doesn't belong to me anymore. What can I give? Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 80. Imperial consort Chun was flustered and exasperated, deceiving the public with lies, full of nonsense. Men, beat her to death for me. The entire room suddenly fell silent. In the silence, a steady footstep became clearer and clearer. Imperial consort Chin's body trembled, and she suddenly had a bad premonition. At this time, a familiar and dark voice came from behind her. Oh, who did you say you want to beat to death? Imperial consort Qin suddenly turned around and saw Shang Siyu standing at the door with one hand behind his back, looking at her with cold eyes. That gaze was no different from looking at a dead person. Imperial consort Qin's heart sank. Didn't her father bring all the ministers to stop him? How could he come here? Shang Siyu walked past her and went straight to Wei Wei Bai. / button. Chapter 77. Wei Wei Bai still had her back to them and did not turn around, as if she was enduring something. Shang Siyu stared at her. Today, she gave him too many surprises, too many scares. He thought she was silly, but smart enough to know his situation. He thought she was gentle and harmless, but she could beat the Qin Fei down. He thought she never hurt people with her words, but her words were like a sharp blade, killing everyone. He thought she was simply infatuated with him. Even if it was not for power, she would not really love him. But he found that her feelings for him were as heavy as the country. There were so many different places, and he had never discovered such a character. He seemed to really know the woman in front of him for the first time. Clearly, his reason told him that she was hiding too much from him, and he must be cautious. But he clearly knew that his heart was shocked when he heard that she was willing to use everything to pave the way for him. His eyes were wet. In this world, there had never been a person who could value him to this extent. And there would never be a person who sacrificed everything just to hold him to the peak. What did he have to deserve to meet her? Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 85. The Qin Fei saw that Shang Siyu did not even look at her, and the bad premonition in her heart became more clear. She was just about to open her mouth to refute, "Emperor, this concubine." Shang Siyu had not thought of her, but when he heard her voice, anger rose from his heart. He reached out to pick up the teacup next to him and threw it at her. Originally, I thought of your family's past merits and thought highly of you, but I didn't expect that the one I favored was an ugly and poisonous woman like you. Guards, this Qin Fei led people to force the emperor to abdicate. You will be stripped of your concubine position, reduced to a commoner, and locked in the prison. When the guards next to him heard this, they immediately rushed forward and violently removed the headdress on the Qin Fei's head. Then, they pulled her away with her disheveled hair. The Qin Fei's heart was torn apart, and she struggled with all her might. Emperor, if you favor this slut, can you ignore this concubine's sincerity for you? For you, I fought against my family and helped you fight for power and profit. I would rather defy my father and help you. I love you. Shang Siyu turned back and finally looked at her. His face was full of ridicule. Love me? The one you love is your empress, right? It was said that your father saw that you were still unable to give birth to a child. So he planned to steal the day and get a man to implant his seed so that you could successfully conceive a child. That way, you'll be able to sit firmly in the back seat, right? The imperial concubine trembled all over, her eyes filled with fear. How did he know about these things? Shang Siyu frowned and coldly said, "Still not pulling it down, it's dirtying my eyes." Qin Fei's face was covered in tears. "Your Majesty, this concubine didn't do that. You can't treat me like this." The voice gradually faded away. The once insufferably arrogant imperial consort was deprived of everything by Shang Siyu and locked up in prison. Wei Wei Bai still didn't turn around, but her body trembled even more violently. Shang Siyu thought that she was afraid of his ruthless means, but when he walked in front of her, he found that her eyes were filled with stubborn tears that refused to fall, and there was no trace of blood on her pale face. This kind of expression seemed to be fear, but it was more like she was stubbornly holding on, not daring to let people find out that she was afraid. Wei Wei. Shang Siyu was speechless for a while. He didn't know why she had such an expression. Did he really scare her? Wei Wei Bai seemed to have finally seen her savior. Suddenly, she plunged into Shang Siyu's arms and sobbed, "Why did you come so late? Just now, someone was shouting to kill me. I was so scared." Shang Siyu, system. Just now, she beat that person to the ground. Was it because she was scared? Collect below to record the reading record of this time. Chapter 77, Emperor 31. Chapter 78. Wei Wei Bai grabbed Shang Siyu's clothes and wiped her tears while accusing the imperial concubine of all kinds of evil deeds. You didn't see the imperial concubine holding a stick and shouting to kill me. She led a group of people and said that if they killed me, they would be able to live a life of glory and wealth. I was so moved. No, I was so scared. Shang Siyu. Wei Wei Bai continued to complain miserably, and she scolded me for being unfaithful and unfilial, saying that I am a witch and a witch. Even if I am ugly, she can't insult me. I am so sad. Shang Siyu. Wei Wei Bai cried, Emperor. Fortunately you came, otherwise you wouldn't have seen me. My arms and legs are small. If the imperial concubine hit me with a stick, wouldn't I die? Shang Siyu. Just now, it was you who kicked me until I was almost paralyzed. The system awkwardly called the host that, hey, you calm down. Wei Wei Bai didn't have time to pay attention to this waste system. She continued to act like a little wife who was being abused. Emperor, my heart is still beating. System, hey, drama queen. Oh no. Host, if your heart doesn't beat, you will die. Fuck, that's not the point. Just now, the male lead was standing outside, so I reminded you. Wei Wei Bai acted so high that she didn't respond to the system's words for a while. She continued to act pitiful in an attempt to capture more favorability. Didn't they say that men like delicate little white lotuses the most? She was now blooming brightly. Emperor, woo-woo. Wei Wei Bai suddenly woke up in the middle of her sobbing. Wei Wei Bai, Wei System, what did you just say? System, Shang Siyu has been standing outside. I reminded you that the male lead was coming, and when the favorability rose, I also reminded you. You didn't hear it, right? Wei Wei Bai, she really didn't hear it. Just now, she was busy cleaning up the imperial concubine. When she got high, she didn't care about anything else. And since the imperial concubine dared to yell at her like that, Shang Siyu must have been hindered. It was impossible for him to appear. So she was particularly free, particularly simple and rough. Wei Wei Bai, System, when I was bullying the imperial concubine, I didn't look like a vicious female supporting female, right? System, female male lead is female's male lead. Female lead is male leads female leads. Ruthless ants. Bai Weiwei was silent for a long time before she timidly looked up and saw Shang Siyu looking at her with a strange expression. Shang Siyu stared at her for a while before he said, You're not crying? Shang Mu, Shang, Zhu, female lead, Muzas, SSS, S's. Shang Siyu found that every time she was nervous, she would pinch her sleeves. Wei Wei Bai's voice weakened. Your Majesty, were you actually outside the whole time? Shang Siyu hesitated to tell the truth. He was indeed outside the whole time. But Wei Wei Bai obviously wanted to pretend to be weak and win sympathy from him. He obviously hated this kind of lying woman the most. But he didn't know why. Looking at Wei Wei Bai, he couldn't hate her at all. Instead, he felt that hers acting was particularly cute. Wei Wei Bai's face was full of despair. Shang Siyu's expression showed that he had been outside the whole time. Hers delicate, White Lotus persona collapsed. His favorability wouldn't drop to -100, right? She felt that she could hold the system and die together. Full text //. Download. Save at the bottom to record the reading record. Chapter 79. Shang Siyu suddenly snorted and couldn't help but laugh. He also couldn't help it. She was simply baring her fangs and brandishing her claws in front of the imperial consort. As a result, when she came here, she began to cry and complain about other people. This kind of her, he thought she was cute. He was simply hopeless. Ding. The male lead's favorability is at 87. Favorability increased by 2. The system and Wei Wei Bai. This can also increase favorability? Shang Siyu bowed his head, his forehead against hers, looking into her clean and clear eyes. How many more surprises can you give me? Wei Wei Bai. These words were gentle and affectionate, without a trace of indifference. Wei Wei Bai looked at him, suddenly raised her head and kissed his lips. It was easy to be surprised. Did her kiss count? Shang Siyu was stunned. His breathing stopped. Then he reached out and clasped her head, kissing her back. This kiss didn't have any lust, nor was it intense, it was just gentle intertwining. The sun came in and stretched their shadows together. It was beautiful and lingering. The imperial consort was solved, but the ministers outside the palace were not solved. It was said that because the Chen family was destroyed, there was a lot of noise outside, and people were in a panic. And by Wei Wei's reputation as a Yao concubine, who knows how it spread, but it spread further and further. Shang Xiyu knew that he had reached the most critical moment. To solve the remaining enemies, he must be ruthless and merciless. He couldn't leave them a trace of possibility of escape. The imperial consort was locked up because of Wei Wei Bai. The Su family would probably come directly to the palace to ask for an explanation. At that time, he could directly clean up the Su family. Once the Su family died, the remaining two families would be easy. But if this goes on, Wei Wei Bai couldn't be saved. Shang Xiyu's face was gloomy. His anxious mood had been tormenting him. Suda, if I don't go down. Suda knelt down, his old tears flowing down. During this time, he had seen the relationship between the emperor and Master Bai. But which was more important between love and the country? Your Majesty, we need you to protect this country. Even if you want to protect the imperial consort, the country is in chaos. You can protect her for a while, but you can't protect her forever. Shang Xiyu knew that at this point, if he took a step back, he might be forced to become a puppet emperor. If they were to fight directly, the foreign races would be eyeing them covetously. He couldn't allow his vitality to be greatly damaged, but he couldn't take even half a step back. Could it be that sacrificing by Wei Wei was the only way? When Shang Xiyu returned, he saw Wei Wei Bai standing at the door with a palace maid holding a lantern next to her. She was wearing a light purple dress. Under the moonlight, she looked like a fairy. Shang Xiyu's heart couldn't help but beat faster. He walked over and said in a gentle tone, "Why don't you wear more? It's cold outside." Wei Wei Bai smiled. This concubine heard that today is your Majesty's birthday. So this concubine made you longevity noodles and ordered them to send wine to celebrate your Majesty's birthday. Birthday? How long had it been since he celebrated his birthday? It seemed that no one remembered his birthday at all. Shang Xiyu's heart warmed up, and he led her in. He saw a table full of dishes and warm wine, and the most conspicuous thing was a bowl of longevity noodles in front of him. "Did you make it?" Shang Xiyu said emotionally. Wei Wei Bai nodded. "I threw the noodles into the pot, and then the imperial chef helped me pick it up." Shang Xiyu. It was estimated that the imperial chef did the kneading and kneading of the dough to make the noodles. Even the subsequent cooking of the noodles was done by the imperial chef. Shang Xiyu sat down, picked up the chopsticks and ate the noodles. After taking a bite, he saw Wei Wei Bai's face full of expectation. He could only praise against his conscience. "The noodles you make are delicious," is at https://www.sashu.com collection below to record the reading record of this time. Chapter 79, Emperor 33. Chapter 80. Wei Wei Bai felt that this sentence was the second best sentence she had ever heard. "What was the first sentence you said?" "Of course, it was the sentence, 'You only have beauty. What else do you have?'" After Shang Xiyu finished eating the noodles, he poured the wine. He was upset and eager to vent his anxiety that could not be solved. Wei Wei Bai saw him drinking eagerly and reached out to stop him. "You can't drink wine like this, Emperor." Shang Xiyu's action paused. He looked up and saw the woman in front of him was beautiful under the light, smiling. Wei Wei Bai had bowed her head and held the cup in his hand. Shang Xiyu's heart moved. His hand followed her movements and poured the wine in the cup into her mouth. Her bright red lips moved slightly, and the wine in her mouth was swallowed. Shang Xiyu felt that the blood in his whole body was boiling. How could she be so seductive? Wei Wei Bai poured another cup of wine and handed it to Shang Xiyu. She also poured a cup for herself, and then hooked her arm around his. "Let's drink a cup of wine." Drinking a cup of wine was a custom for newlyweds to exchange wine and drink with each other. His voice became hoarse. "Do you know what this means?" Drinking a cup of wine also had another meaning, which was marriage. Wei Wei Bai didn't think so much. She just felt that Shang Xiyu couldn't be so decadent. Now the two of them were grasshoppers on the same rope. If Shang Xiyu fell, she estimated that she wouldn't be able to get enough favorability and would be hacked to death. Shang Xiyu saw her expression and knew that she didn't think so deeply. Maybe she just wanted to make him happy. He used his hand and drank a cup of wine with her, but his eyes were stubbornly looking at her. Wei Wei Bai actually didn't drink much. After drinking the wine, she began to get drunk. She was unprepared and was coaxed by Shang Xiyu to drink several cups of wine. When her consciousness began to become confused, she said to the system vigilantly, "If I say anything that will cause favorability to drop, remember to remind me." The system said, "Go ahead, I'll remind you." Wei Wei Bai was relieved. She tried hard to see Shang Xiyu's appearance, but finally gave up helplessly. What kind of person was Shang Xiyu? He could see that she couldn't hold her liquor. She staggered to her feet and gave him a lovely smile. "Your Majesty, why are you still moving?" Shang Xiyu sat and looked at her helplessly. "I didn't move." Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips and grabbed him domineeringly. "I said not to move, so you're not allowed to move." Shang Xiyu had always known that her character was more lively, but the environment in the palace was particularly depressing, which caused her character to be very nervous at the beginning. After getting drunk, she seemed to have regained her pure and extroverted personality. Shang Xiyu said softly, "Your character is actually not suitable for entering the palace. I don't know who sent you in." Wei Wei Bai sat on Shang Xiyu's lap and reached out to hold his face. She said drunkenly, "Who sent me here? I came by myself. Of course, it's for you." What Chunxia, the emperor, Wei Wei Bai couldn't remember. She only remembered the favorability. Shang Xiyu stiffened. "For me?" Wei Wei Bai raised her hand and carefully traced his face. "I still remember. Our family lived in a place very far from here. It was plundered by foreigners for many years. Once, I was robbed when I went out. I thought I was dead, but a young general wearing armor and riding a black horse appeared and saved me." Read the full text. Download the full text. Read the full text. Collection below to record the reading record. Chapter 81. Wei Wei Bai said this and couldn't help but reveal a very affectionate smile. At that time, I was only 10 years old, but I knew that the person I would marry in the future must be him. Shang Xiyu tried hard to think about it. Wei Wei Bai's home was indeed a place where foreigners often looted, and Wei Wei Bai was the daughter of a local official there. Wei Wei Bai's voice was soft. "That person is you. You are my hero. You came to pick me up on the clouds. I told myself that no matter where you are, I will follow you. Whether it is the human world or hell, I will find you." Shang Xiyu's eyes were dry. He did go to that place and killed foreign enemies, but he couldn't remember if he had saved a lovely girl. Wei Wei Bai was drunk and hazy. She smiled and said, "You see, I found you. Ding. The male lead's favorability is at 90. System. Listening to the host's serious nonsense with an indifferent face, Shang Xiyu felt that he was surrounded by emotions. He never thought that his heart could be soft to this point. "If I am not the emperor, will you still want me?" Wei Wei Bai was drunk, but her eyes were as pure as the starry sky. "You are stupid. I love Xiaojiang, not the emperor." "No, no, no. Even if you are a beggar, I will run to be your beggar woman." Shang Xiyu's voice trembled slightly. "Even if I just use you?" Wei Wei Bai tilted her head and seemed to not understand what he was saying. "Use me?" She thought for a moment and finally patted her head with her hand. "I am stupid. I don't know what you are talking about, but it's okay. After you use me, don't throw me away. Okay?" Wei Wei Bai was like a child, her expression sad. "Because I don't know if I can find you again next time." Shang Xiyu closed his eyes and the tears in his eyes fell to the ground. "You are so stupid." Bai Weiwei giggled. "I'm not stupid. I know that the Chen Fei is a bad woman. I know that there are many bad people around you. I also know that you are working hard." Shang Xiyu opened his eyes and saw Wei Wei Bai's worried expression. He gently touched her hair. "Don't be afraid. Those bad people, I will beat them away." Wei Wei Bai immediately became confident. "Of course, you are the best. No one can beat you." Ding. The male lead's favorability is at 95. System. What should I do when the drunk host is more terrible than usual? His favorability was soaring like he had been injected with a cow's blood. Drunk, Wei Wei buys childishly. She grabbed Siyu and muttered some nonsense words. Shang Siyu was very patiently with her. When the moon fell and the sky was about to brighten, Shang Siyu hugged her and put her back on the bed. He laid down as well and hugged her to sleep. Wei Wei buys Wei Wei. Wei. He knew that there wouldn't be a woman in this world who was so adorable. She was so stupid that even if she was used by him, she still refused to give up loving him. She was so stupid. How could he throw her away? He was reluctant and unwilling to part with her. Shang Siyu didn't sleep all night looking at Wei Wei Bai. When it was bright, he let someone come in to serve her. But he didn't let anyone wake her up. When Suda helped him put on his clothes, he said respectfully, "The Su family is here." Shang Siyu knew that the Qin Fei was in prison, so the Su family would definitely come. His expression didn't change. If they come, then they will come. The plan will be carried out according to the original plan. //T. Chapter 82. The head eunuch was stunned. He thought that Shang Siyu couldn't bear to sacrifice Wei Wei Bai, but he still followed the original plan? Shang Siyu then said, "First solve the 4 great families, then I can face the rest of the forces, and even the outsiders." When the head eunuch heard this was not right. After solving the 4 great families, wouldn't Wei Wei Bai be pushed out as a scapegoat? Once Wei Wei Bai died, others would have no excuse to rebel. It was even more impossible for outsiders to attack. Shang Siyu looked at the bed. He wrapped her tightly. Because she was drunk, he didn't know when she would wake up. When he saw her, he knew how the ancient emperors felt when they became incapable rulers who couldn't distinguish right from wrong for their women. If it was him, so what if he was scolded by the world for being incapable? As long as she was by his side, he could bear anything. Between the country and her, he finally chose her. Yes, in the end, the sacrifice is not her, but me. After killing the 4 great families, he would not sacrifice Wei Wei Bai. At that time, everyone in the world would scold him, and he could bear it. He could bear to lose the respect and love of everyone in the world. But he couldn't sacrifice the heart of a silly woman who loved him. The head eunuch's fingers trembled, and he understood their predicament. He sighed twice, as if he was a few years older. "Well, this old slave's cheap life is nothing, but I am willing to accompany the emperor." Shang Siyu put on his dragon robe, flicked his sleeves, and coldly said, "Well, let them get ready. I will rush out and kill the Su family." After Shang Siyu left for a long time, Wei Wei Bai climbed out of the bed with a headache. "What happened last night? Why do I feel like my head is a watermelon? It hurts so much." People who don't drink are always particularly painful when they wake up drunk. The system chuckled. Wei Wei Bai had goosebumps. "Are you thinking of love? Why are you laughing so lewdly?" The system almost choked itself to death. Why didn't the host ever say anything nice? The system was expressionless. "Oh, I don't know what kind of cheat you did last night, but your favorability rating was raised to 95. Wei Wei Bai was stunned. Her favorability was at 95? She rubbed her temples and said with a headache, "Last night, I seem to have been dreaming. I dreamt of Journey to the West, where Joker stepped on the clouds to pick up Zixia Fairy. After that, I can't remember anything." System. "No wonder you started talking about the peerless hero and the clouds," she said. "Show me the replay." The system showed her the replay. After reading it, Wei Wei Bai remained silent for a long time. Finally, she lay back on the bed and sighed. It seems that Shang Siyu wants to kill the other 3 families, and then bear the consequences of being an incapable ruler by himself. She looked at the top of the bed with some annoyance. She didn't know what she was entangled with. After thinking for a while, she said, "He can't be like this. He is a wise ruler. If he really takes all the blame, he may not be able to keep the throne in the end." The system was suddenly moved. The love between the emperor and the concubine was simply moving. Then the system heard Wei Wei Bai say worriedly, "If he can't be the emperor, won't my side task be over? My everlasting youth reward?" The system was moved, Screw the love between the emperor and the concubine. It didn't believe in love anymore. Button. Chapter 83. When the Su family was exterminated, Wei Wei Bai was eating melons. She knew that Shang Xiyu moved quickly, but she didn't expect that he would destroy people so simply and violently. The Su family also didn't expect that Shang Xiyu would raise the butcher's knife without any scruples. She heard that the Su family had someone leading the army outside, and as a result, the people under them rebelled at the same time, and immediately eradicated the Su family's power in the army. Wei Wei Bai listened to the melons and dropped them. Was this the ability of the male lead? When she was the leader of the company, she fought with the old men in the company for a long time. Although she won in the end, she had a heart attack several times. If Shang Xiyu went back to her company to be the CEO or something, it was estimated that he could lead her company to the first position in the world. It was said that the Chun Fei couldn't even be a concubine and followed her father to the guillotine. It was estimated that it was all over by now. The Liang family and the Wu family were trembling with fear and were contacting their own forces, intending to rebel. 2 of the 4 great clans had been wiped out, but there were still many remaining forces that hadn't been wiped out. These forces had also joined in the mighty rebellion. Shang Xiyu didn't say a word to her, and he didn't allow anyone to say it to her. But he couldn't prevent her from having a gossipy system. The system was still chattering away, gesticulating with joy. The rebel forces have already pulled out a carp in the river, and the carp's belly hid a brocade book. The book said that the Shang Jun was cruel and heartless, and the heavens will send down the wrath of the heavens. Therefore, the rebel forces have named themselves Heaven's Wrath. This Heaven's Wrath army has begun to resist the imperial army and will soon enter the city. They will hang you and Shang Xiyu, this pair of dogman and dogwoman. Then, they will use iron knives to treat you like Peking duck and cut you into pieces to serve as wine and dishes. Wei Wei Bai suddenly lost her appetite, and the melon in her hand couldn't eat anymore. Dogman, dogwoman, Peking duck. She put down the melon in her hand and just wiped her hands. She saw that Shang Xiyu had already walked to the door, standing in the place where the light and shadow intertwined, staring at her. Wei Wei Bai was a little embarrassed as she looked at the muskmelon skin on the table and the crumbs of snacks on the floor. She reached out and moved the melon peel a little further away, pretending that she hadn't eaten that much. Then, she happily went up to him. "Your Majesty." Wei Wei Bai bowed. Shang Xiyu grabbed her hand. "How can you eat so much cold melon? What if you have a stomachache?" After he finished speaking, he looked at Hong Xiu and Lu Lei. "Don't do it again. If something happens to your master, you don't have to serve her anymore." The female eunuchs in the room immediately knelt down and begged for forgiveness. Wei Wei Bai's mouth twitched. She really couldn't adapt to this evil feudal society. After Shang Xiyu let people pack up everything, he took her hand and sat down on the chair. He smiled and said, "Jin, let Su to prepare. After a while, when everything is ready, we can hold your coronation ceremony." Wei Wei Bai was shocked. "Seal? Seal what?" Shang Xiyu saw her surprised look. His smile faded a bit, but his eyes were still hot. "I want to marry you." The word marry was used on the legal wife. In the royal family, only the empress could use the word marry. From promise to Zhao Yi to Huangue Fei, and then to the empress. This time was almost as fast as the speed of light. Wei Wei Bai bowed her head, and her fingers couldn't help but pinch her sleeves. Shang Xiyu's eyes darkened. "What, you don't want to?" Wei Wei Bai shook her head. When she looked up again, her eyes were red. She sniffled. Chen Xie was just moved. Chen Xie didn't expect to hear the emperor say this one day. The Chapter 84. Shang Xiyu reached out and wiped the tears on her face. "Now you heard it, Zhen. No, I want to marry you." Shang Xiyu wants to marry Wei Wei Bai. Ding. The male lead's favorability is at 97. Wei Wei Bai's eyelashes trembled, and there was a trace of complex emotions in her eyes. Finally, she showed a relieved and beautiful smile. "I also want to marry you." Wei Wei Bai wants to marry Shang Xiyu. Ding. The male lead's favorability is at 98. The 2 people looked at each other and smiled, sweet and warm. The head eunuch stood outside, and the old tears in his eyes almost rolled down. The rebel forces were getting more and more powerful. Shang Xiyu often studied military intelligence all night. The Liang family and the Wu family were almost destroyed because of their misjudgment and Shang Xiyu's strong suppression. But the four great families were destroyed. Shang Xiyu didn't give an explanation, which made many old ministers feel cold. As for the rest of the local forces, some had already used this as an excuse to rebel. Some people had already written a crusade against Shang Xiyu, describing him as a tyrant who was muddle-headed for a woman. However, Shang Xiyu stubbornly ignored the pressure of the various forces and continued to kill the remaining forces of the four great families. As for the coronation ceremony, it was almost ready. After Shang Xiyu checked all kinds of things that needed to appear tomorrow, he told the palace people some things that needed to be paid attention to. When everything was ready, he walked out of the hall with a sigh of relief. He looked at the stars in the sky. Outside the city gate, various forces had already gathered. Many old ministers who were bitterly disappointed also came to the palace gate overnight, saying that they wanted to seek an explanation for the four great families. Because he wanted to be the empress, he angered everyone. Wei Wei Bai's reputation as an enchantress could no longer be suppressed. He suddenly changed from a wise ruler to a fatuous one. Everyone felt that it must be because of Wei Wei Bai's bewitchment. If he insisted on marrying her, then those forces would collectively rebel. Shang Xiyu walked to his residence and saw Wei Wei Bai with her head down embroidering something. He looked at it from a distance. Wasn't that the Flower Fairy Festival mythological beast that she said she would embroider for him? Her embroidery skills were not good enough. She had been embroidering a sachet for so long, yet she still hadn't finished it. Shang Xiyu looked at her sideways. Under the light, her beauty was clearly visible. His mood immediately relaxed. How could the betrayal of the world compare to the smile of this woman in front of him? Wei Wei Bai yawned and looked up to see Shang Xiyu standing next to her. She was scared to death. Wei Wei Bai, Siwei, why didn't you remind me? The system was silent for a while, then said in a strange tone, didn't I just go to take a shower? What whole body care, exfoliation, scrubbing and washing, and finally skincare? I'm very busy, don't call me for such small things. Wei Wei Bai, did she offend the system again? Shang Xiyu saw Wei Wei Bai and hid the embroidered bandage in his hand behind him. He pretended not to see it. After all, Wei Wei Bai may want to give him a surprise. Wei Wei Bai smiled awkwardly and said, Your Majesty, are you done with your work? Her hands were simply itchy and wanted to practice her cross-stitch kung fu. As a result, Doraemon's embroidery was too eye-catching. She really wanted to throw this thing into the trash can. Shang Xiyu's voice softened a lot. I'm done with my work. Your clothes have been sent over. Do you want to try them on? Bai Weiwei thought of the Empress's outfit. So many jeans. Just the headdress alone could bend her neck. Fast. Chapter 85. She quickly shook her head. I'll wear it tomorrow. Shang Xiyu nodded and found that it was already late at night. So he asked someone to send some sweet soup that Wei Wei Bai liked. He was worried that she would be hungry and wouldn't be able to hold on tomorrow. Wei Wei Bai felt that although Shang Xiyu was very difficult to capture at the beginning, after capturing him, she found that he turned out to be a big, warm man. The two people chatted while eating. Shang Xiyu was a person with rich experience. He knew a little about everything and had been to many places. So when they talked, it was particularly interesting and fun. Usually, he was the emperor and was used to being serious, so no one dared to talk to him like this. She didn't know how to talk about the time when he led the army into the palace. Shang Xiyu's voice also became hoarse at that time. The crown prince killed the previous emperor himself, and the second prince was also betrayed and stabbed to death by his own people, and my imperial concubine mother also. Speaking of this, Shang Xiyu suddenly felt sad and couldn't continue. People in the world thought that he was cruel and merciless, killing his own family and ascending to the throne. But who knew that he didn't intend to be the emperor from the beginning? Wei Wei Bai's expression also became heavy. At this time, she knew that any comfort was useless because Shang Xiyu only needed to pour out his heart. Shang Xiyu reluctantly smiled. I was the emperor at that time. I also thought that one day I could take revenge. At that time, I had been leading the army outside, so I saw too many people suffering. At that time, I thought that if I were the emperor, I would not let the people suffer so much. Wei Wei Bai secretly sighed. He is indeed a good emperor. She reached out, held his hand, and said seriously, "You are a good emperor." Really? Shang Siyu's mood was a bit depressed. When he heard her comfort, he couldn't help but say, "I would rather not be the emperor." In this way, he could take her away from here without being condemned by the whole world. The sky was already bright, and unknowingly, they had been sitting all night. Wei Wei Bai was very calm as she let people bring tea, and then handed it to Shang Siyu. "We are going to get married later. Drink some tea to wake up your spirit." Shang Siyu didn't think much, and was just about to drink. However, Wei Wei Bai had already hooked her arm around his. Her smile was bright and sly. "Let's drink cross-cup tea." Shang Siyu was stunned and couldn't help but smile. Then he followed her movements and somewhat laboriously completed the action of drinking tea. Not long after he finished drinking, Shang Siyu suddenly felt numb and fell down. This medicine was similar to an anesthetic. It would prevent the person from losing consciousness, but they would also be unable to move. Wei Wei Bai looked at Shang Siyu in disbelief. Her smile didn't change, but her expression was a little more sorrowful. "Someone come? Help the emperor change his clothes." Suda came over and dressed him under Shang Siyu's angry eyes. When Wei Wei Bai saw that his toggle and loop button was not fastened properly, she bent down and gently helped him fasten it. After that, Wei Wei Bai said to Suda, "Let's go." Shang Siyu looked at them silently. Suda betrayed him? Where is Wei Wei Bai? What were they going to do? Shang Siyu's mood at this moment was terrible. Soon, Shang Siyu was carried to the dragon throne. Then he was carried to the palace gate and put down. This place was very high, enough to see the ministers kneeling below. The ministers below had good eyesight and saw Shang Siyu sitting on it. Everyone shouted "Long live," and then fiercely begged the emperor to give them an explanation. Collection below to record this reading record. Chapter 86. The head eunuch stood respectfully beside Shang Siyu. Looking from afar, it was as if Shang Siyu was sitting straight, cold, and without any expression, and Wei Wei Bai was standing below. The drug was given by the head eunuch, but the plan was thought by her. She drugged Shang Siyu, and then in his name, killed her, and this matter was over. Anyway, the 4 great clans were destroyed by Shang Siyu. Others had no reason to rebel, and the ministers also had a way out. Shang Siyu was also a wise ruler, and she could also go back. What a beautiful ending. Although she did a lot of mental preparation, when she saw the executioner above, she couldn't help but feel scared. System, it really doesn't hurt, right? System, it doesn't hurt, it doesn't hurt. I will help you block the pain for a while, free of charge, no credit. Wei Wei Bai was moved. You are so kind. System, I am really fed up with you making mischief in this plane, holding your beautiful face every day and feeling sorry for yourself. I am afraid that if I look at it for too long, my brain will be damaged. So can you quickly finish the strategy and let's get out of here? Destroying its beautiful imagination of love, it turned from a fan to an anti-fan. Wei Wei Bai, she took a deep breath, kicked off the shoes on her feet, and then let the people next to her tie a rope to her, and let people mess up her hair. When her image was miserable enough, she was pushed to the wall and knelt in front of Shang Siyu. When Shang Siyu saw her like this, his eyes immediately turned red. He looked at her angrily, desperately trying to move, but he couldn't move at all. The head eunuch had already held a fake imperial edict and loudly announced to the kneeling Wei Wei Bai, "Bitch by sure, poisonous and jealous, confused my heart, stirred up the harem, used a treacherous plot to kill the imperial concubine, forged an imperial edict to destroy the Su, Qian, Liang, Wu, for families." A pile of evidence said nothing more than that the 4 great clans were all killed by Wei Wei Bai. And Shang Siyu didn't find out because Wei Wei Bai poisoned him, making him often lose his mind and listen to her words. The reason was really nonsense, but all he needed was a reason. After Suda finished reading, his hands were shaking. He looked deeply at Wei Wei Bai, and in the end, his voice was almost choked with sobs. "Madam Bai has committed a heinous crime. She is to be sentenced to death. Shang Xiyu struggled desperately. When he heard that he was going to die, he was stunned. Wei Wei Bai smiled at him and said in a low voice, "Your Majesty, this concubine has 3 wishes in this life. The first is that this country will always be prosperous, that barbarians will never invade, and that people from all sides will come to congratulate. Secondly, I hope that your Majesty will be safe and worry-free, that everything will go smoothly, and that you will live a long life. The 3 wishes were to hold your hand and grow old with you. When my hair is white, you will still be by my side." These words were like 10,000 arrows piercing through his heart. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 100. Wei Wei Bai heaved a sigh of relief. Then, she saw her head fly up. She didn't feel any pain at all. Shang Xiyu didn't know how long he had been sitting there. The effect of the drug had passed, but he didn't move. He still maintained his sitting posture. The minister left after receiving a satisfactory answer. The rebel forces outside the city had no reason to rebel, so they could only leave. Everything fell to the ground. Only Shang Xiyu was left sitting on the dragon throne. There was also the blood on the ground in Wei Wei Bai's body. Suda had already knelt down and kowtowed to the ground. This was the imperial concubine's idea. This old slave also agreed. This old slave knows that his crime is unforgivable, but I don't regret it. He was the same as Wei Wei Bai. They both knew that Shang Xiyu was a rare good emperor. So Wei Wei Bai would rather destroy herself to protect him. Shang Xiyu didn't say anything. He just stared blankly in front of him. Suddenly, he stood up and said, "Zhan and Wei Wei are going to get married today. It's time to change clothes." Suda burst into tears. "Your Majesty, the imperial concubine is going." The download address is at https://www.sashu.com. Collect button below to record the reading record of this time. Chapter 86, Emperor 40. Chapter 87. Shang Xiyu acted as if he didn't hear it. His eyes were empty as he walked forward. Suddenly, his feet were wet. He looked down and saw blood all over the ground. He was too familiar with this kind of thing. From birth to the present, he had accompanied a bloody life. Why was there blood? The head eunuch followed him all the way. "Your Majesty, wake up, the imperial concubine is gone." Shang Xiyu's expression was stiff. His eyes were dull, and he repeated, "Gone?" He seemed to be unable to understand what this sentence meant. Gone? Where did she go? "Today is our wedding day. Didn't you see? Everything is ready. I personally watched Wei Wei's clothes embroidered by the palace servants. She will definitely look good wearing them." Shang Xiyu showed a fleeting smile and repeated foolishly, "She will definitely look good." The head eunuch burst into tears. "It's all this old slave's fault. This old slave deserves to die. Please, Your Majesty, grant me death." Shang Xiyu suddenly became furious. He kicked the head eunuch out. "What death? Today is such a good day. Who dares to say these inauspicious words? Jin will cut off your head." The head eunuch was kicked until he vomited blood and fell to the ground. He looked at Shang Xiyu. A person who was so sad to the point of despair was actually escaping, as if Wei Wei Bai was not dead. Shang Xiyu took a few steps and suddenly staggered. He fell to the ground. The ground was full of blood, and he couldn't walk anymore. Wei Wei Bai's head fell into a pool of blood not far away. Her expression didn't show any trace of pain. It was serene and quiet, as if she was sleeping. Shang Xiyu was almost as stiff as a stone, so he looked at her dead head stupidly. He suddenly laughed twice. "Wei Wei, the ground is cold. Why are you lying on the ground? Jin will help you up." He trembled as he held her head. "Why is it so cold? Jin will warm you up." "Warm up?" Shang Xiyu hysterically held her head in his arms, untied his clothes, and wrapped her, as if this could bring back the delicate warmth on her face. But it was too cold. She was too cold. He couldn't warm her heart. He had killed her. Shang Xiyu's face was completely bloodless. He looked miserably at the blood on the ground. Looking at Wei Wei Bai's body, he knelt like this. His whole person was in despair. A sharp pain struck him without warning. The heart-wrenching pain caused him to completely collapse. He was like a lone wolf that had lost its mate. His body went limp as if his spine had been broken. He laughed with tears streaming down his face, and blood seeped out from between his tightly clenched teeth. It was so tragic that even his body was dying. Ha ha, without you, what is the use of this country? The first time he saw her, she was standing in the pool and stealing glances at him. As her eyes wandered, it was as if all the beauties in the world were not even half as beautiful as her. It turned out that he was already moved by that one glance. Ding. Strategy successful. You have received 1 compassion point. Please choose your wish. Wei Wei Bai and the system had already walked far away, and they didn't see Xing Siyu's subsequent reaction. When she heard the system's reminder, she immediately said, "Lifespan?" Her life now was simply a race against time. Your lifespan is extended by 1 month. Does the host choose to wake up immediately? Wei Wei Bai did not hesitate to nod and agree. Yes. Ding. The host's wish has been fulfilled. Wei Wei Bai immediately entered the familiar darkness. It was quiet and comfortable. Teeth. Chapter 88. The torrential rain poured down, hitting the wide floor-to-ceiling window. In a huge, dark room, on a simple bed, a man suddenly woke up, his whole body trembling violently. The pain made his face pale. Suddenly, blood overflowed from the corner of his mouth, and his heart felt like it was being torn apart. He reached out and pinched his chest, enduring the pain. He clapped his hands, and the voice-controlled lights lit up. The decoration design of the huge room was extremely simple and cold, with a sense of high gloominess. Sitting on the bed, Yi Yuxuan's face was still pale. He frowned, and his handsome face had a deep murderous aura in the shadows. That dream. He couldn't remember the woman's name and appearance. But he was like the emperor in the dream, experiencing the most romantic love in the world with her, and at the same time completely losing her. Was this the feeling of heartache? Yi Yuxuan looked at the blood on his hand with some puzzlement. He touched his mouth. When the pain was at its peak, he actually vomited blood. It seemed that his body really had a problem. He called Qin Xiu, Uncle Qin. Come and check me with the equipment. I just vomited blood. His tone was very flat, as if he was explaining official business. Qin Xiu had just done a major operation and was about to rest when he received a call from Yi Yuxuan. He immediately woke up. Who was Yi Yuxuan? To let him call the doctor and say that he vomited blood. It was estimated that his internal organs were broken. He immediately packed up the equipment and rushed to Yi Yuxuan's house with his assistant, and then rushed to Yi Yuxuan's room. What happened? Ah, you vomited blood. Qin Xiu thought that when he opened the door, he would see Yi Yuxuan dying. As a result, Yi Yuxuan was wearing casual clothes, watching a video with no expression. Qin Xiu was not interested in what video he was watching, because Yi Yuxuan's brain was in addition to work, and the things he was watching must be related to work, so it was boring. He looked around. You vomited blood. Where's the blood? Yi Yuxuan coldly said. Not after bathing. Qin Xiu was anxious. No. What kind of injury did you suffer that made you vomit blood? Car accident, gunshot wound, or atomic bomb attack? Yi Yuxuan couldn't even be bothered to look at him. You vomited blood after having a dream. Qin Xiu said. Another dream? Yi Yuxuan finally had a trace of expression on his face. It was a kind of feeling like his heart was dead. I dreamt of it. That man created a prosperous dynasty, but he committed suicide. The follow-up of The Emperor is Above, The Concubine is Below. The emperor had been on the throne for more than 10 years, and the dynasty was thriving. Today was the flower festival, and there were drawings of divine beasts guarding the flower festival everywhere. The divine beast had a white face, a blue head, and no fingers. It looked very cute, and others called it Blue Fatty. It was said that the Flower Fairy Festival originally did not have a divine beast, but the late empress had designed this divine beast. It was said that it was to protect love. Today was also the day when the emperor swept away the foreign tribes and returned in triumph. After the empress died, the emperor, to clear her name, worked hard to wipe out all the remaining rebel forces in the country. He boldly appointed new officials, swept away the decadent atmosphere of the previous dynasty, and led the dynasty on the road to prosperity. Then he issued an imperial edict, saying that the four great families were rebel forces, and that the empress sacrificed herself to protect the emperor. The name of the treacherous concubine was swept away. Only the name of the virtuous was passed down through the ages. Just as the outside world was celebrating because of the victory of the war and the Flower Fairy Festival, their emperor came to his tomb alone with wine. Chapter 89. The mausoleum was built from the beginning so that the empress and the emperor could be buried together. Shang Xiyu carried the wine and opened the secret passage of the mausoleum. His figure was still tall and straight, and time did not leave any traces on his face, but his hair was already white. He couldn't wait to enter the tomb in the middle of the mausoleum, where there was a huge sarcophagus. Lying inside was the skeleton of Wei Wei Bai. Shang Xiyu walked to the sarcophagus and couldn't help but reach out and gently touch the sarcophagus, as if he was stroking his favorite woman. He smiled softly and said, "I'm here, Wei Wei." He was very familiar with this place as he often came here. Today is the Flower Festival. Do you remember that year when we went out of the palace to celebrate the Flower Festival together? You said that you wanted this country to become prosperous, and I helped you achieve it. The foreigners have been defeated and driven away, and they will not be able to come back for decades. I have also opened the channel to select honest officials, and the court is clear. All that should be done, I have done, and this country has gone in the best direction. I have also chosen the best successor, not my child. I have disbanded the harem, and there is no woman. That child has enough ability and enough thought to govern a country well. I have written the edict to abdicate, and he will see it tomorrow morning. Shang Xiyu poured the wine and then whispered, "From today onwards, I am not the emperor, and I can go to you. I can't let you come to me every time, and I don't know if you are waiting for me at the Naiha Bridge, or if you have already been reincarnated." He slowly drank the wine, and after a while, the poisonous wine took effect. He opened the sarcophagus and saw the skeleton inside wearing the empress clothes. He couldn't help but laugh. Then he lay down, reached out to hold her hand, and closed the sarcophagus with internal force. "No matter where you go, I can always find you." Qin Xiu was speechless for a long time. "So you vomited blood?" Yi Yuxuan watched the video seriously and nodded lazily. He vomited blood, but it's just a mouthful of blood. Other than the pain in his heart, there's nothing else wrong with him. Qin Xiu took the examination instrument. It's better to check it. After all, vomiting blood must be because there is something wrong with the body. Yi Yuxuan paused the video and then walked over to the sofa and lay down. Qin Xiu and his assistant gave him a basic physical examination very seriously and found that there was indeed no major problem. "If you still want to vomit blood, remember to go to the hospital tomorrow. I'll give you a full body checkup." At home, many of the more in-depth examinations could not be done. Yi Yuxuan sat in front of his laptop again. The light from the laptop screen shone on his face, giving him a gloomy and oppressive feeling. Qin Xiu sat opposite him and earnestly advised, "Don't take your body lightly. You know, many serious illnesses have signs." Yi Yuxuan seemed to be thinking about something. He suddenly asked, "Does losing make people feel very painful?" Qin Xiu, "Lost?" Yi Yuxuan nodded seriously. Qin Xiu touched his chin and said, "It depends on what you lose. I don't feel any heartache at all when I lose a piece of garbage. But if I lose my full set of custom-made scalpels, I guess I'll feel heartache until I hit my head." Yi Yuxuan himself lacked happiness, anger, sorrow, and joy. He also lacked emotional perception. So although he has been working feverishly, it was not because he liked it. Chapter 90. But because he was like a robot, the program was set from the beginning, and he just followed the program. If his huge business empire was destroyed in an instant, Yi Yuxuan probably would not feel pain, because he didn't even know what pain was. But he just asked, would it be painful to lose? After Yi Yuxuan listened, he looked at Qin Xiu and said, "I also feel heartache. Is it because of loss?" Qin Xiu did not respond for a while. "What did you lose?" When he finished asking, he suddenly sobered up. "The woman in your dream?" Yi Yuxuan's still eyes showed a trace of doubt. "She made me feel like I am alive like you." Yi Yuxuan was abnormal since childhood. He lived like he was separated by a glass. Looking at the people outside the glass, he was completely unable to feel other people's laughter. But in his dream, he really felt it. Qin Xiu suddenly felt a little strange. The woman in your last dream and this dream, are they the same? Yi Yuxuan nodded without hesitation. Although I can't remember the face and the name, they are the same person. Qin Xiu looked at Yi Yuxuan with a strange look. Yi Yuxuan did not respond, letting him look at him. Suddenly Qin Xiu clapped his hands. I think your time is up because you have these dreams recently. Yi Yuxuan said indifferently. Time? Qin Xiu laughed twice. It's the time of spring. Look at you. You're so old. You haven't even held a woman's hand. I think you've been holding it in for too long and want to vent. Yi Yuxuan said lightly. I don't need to vent. His desire in this regard was frighteningly faint, like it was dormant. Qin Xiu's face was wretched. All men want it. Don't you have a fiancé? Although you haven't met more than 10 times, you'll know after you get married. Yi Yuxuan was expressionless. Fiancé? Oh, you mean that woman who's about to die? Qin Xiu. What do you mean dead? It was just a heart attack. The hospital rescued her. I looked at the medical record. When she wakes up, she will still be alive. Yi Yuxuan's tone did not change. She'll probably die tonight. Someone injected her with a highly toxic liquid. She won't live for more than an hour. After saying that, Yi Yuxuan looked at the clock. At this time, the poison should have already taken effect. We can't save him. Qin Xiu was stunned. What the hell? Someone is trying to hurt your fiancé, and you didn't stop them when you knew? Yi Yuxuan's eyes were cold. If he dies, we'll find another one. There are too many of these substitutes. He had chosen Wei Wei Bai because this woman's status and family background were just right. He had chosen her randomly from hundreds of introductions. If she dies, he can just choose another one. Qin Xiu's finger trembled as he pointed at Yi Yuxuan. He wanted to say something several times, but looking at Yi Yuxuan's stubborn demeanor, he knew that it was useless to say anything. Finally, he held his head in his hands and howled, Damn it, call the hospital. Protect Wei Wei Bai. The assistant immediately went to make the call. Qin Xiu held the medical kit in his hand and gave Yi Yuxuan the middle finger. Then he turned around and ran out. No matter what, she was Yi Yuxuan's fiancée. How could she be killed like this? When Wei Wei Bai woke up, she was not surprised to see that she was still lying in the hospital bed. /to-txt. Download TTT. Chapter 91. It was raining heavily outside, and the thunder was rumbling. It was late at night, and there was no one in the ward. The nurses had all disappeared. Wei Wei Bai instinctively felt that something was amiss. Because of her status, there would definitely be nurses around her in shifts, even if it was late at night. System, I smell a conspiracy. The system asked, Are you a dog? Wei Wei Bai was speechless. Wei Wei Bai decided not to think too much. She should contact her father first and chase Bai Yao Yao out. She got off the bed and pulled out the drip on her wrist. Black blood seeped out from under her skin. Wei Wei Bai was stunned. Black? The system was silent as well. It sighed. Look at you. Your heart is too black. Even your blood is stained black. In the future, you need to have a conscience. Don't think about how to cheat others. You need to be sincere. Wei Wei Bai's expression turned ugly. Damn you. I've been poisoned. The system flipped through its collection and looked at the host's data. Fuck. Host, you're about to die. No, you're already dead. The poison has already taken effect. You can't be more dead. Wei Wei Bai realized that her vision was turning black. The world was spinning, and she couldn't even stand properly. The system said, if it weren't for the 1-month lifespan reward, you would have been dead long ago. However, it's about time now. Your 1-month lifespan is quickly draining away to replenish your body. Wei Wei Bai breathed heavily. She was starting to feel suffocated. I'm going to die? The system said, 1 month is enough to expel the poison, but you have to continue completing missions to save your life. Wei Wei Bai didn't waste any time. How much time do I have left? The system said, only 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, I will force you into a deep sleep. I also have a free newbie gift package that will give you 3 days of vegetative life. Wei Wei Bai stumbled out. 3 minutes? She didn't even have time to look for a phone call. She still remembered her father's ward. It was impossible for Bai Changyin to be discharged in such a short time. After more than 2 minutes, she finally arrived outside Bai Changyin's ward. In the end, she saw Bai Yaoyao opening the door and walking out. This rotten white lotus must be pretending to be filial and coaxing her father to sign his name. Bai Yaoyao had just received news that Wei Wei Bai had stopped breathing. Very soon, the nurses would discover Wei Wei Bai's corpse the next morning. Just as she was feeling smug and happy, she opened the door to the ward. Before she could even retract her smug smile, she saw Wei Wei Bai standing outside the door with a pale face and disheveled hair. Rumble, thunder, and lightning flashed. Wei Wei Bai shrieked, "Bai Yaoyao, you be *T." Bai Yaoyao was stunned. The cold wind blew in the corridor, and the violent wind howled. Wei Wei Bai was surrounded by a ghostly aura. Was this Bai Wei Wei, who had died tragically, coming for revenge? Bai Yaoyao's heart immediately rose to her throat. She was terrified. Elder sister, elder sister, elder sister. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. I didn't kill her. Don't come looking for me. The system said, elder sister, elder sister, elder sister. Is this woman stuttering? Wei Wei Bai didn't have the time to reminisce with her. She could already hear the countdown to her life. Remaining life countdown. 6 seconds, 5 seconds. Wei Wei Bai reached out and grabbed Bai Yaoyao's neck harshly. Give me back my life. Give me back my life. Ah! Every time she did a mission, she would be on the brink of death. When she finally managed to survive, she would die the moment she opened her eyes. Who could understand such a feeling? She would go crazy. 3 seconds, 2 seconds. Ding. The newbie gift is unlocked. You will be in a vegetative state for 3 days. Please complete the next mission quickly to save your life. Save her life? Right now, she only wanted to strangle Bai Yaoyao. That black-hearted be *T. Die. Crossover system. Adonis, come here. /crossover system. Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu.com. Download Transmigration system. Adonis, come here and read this on your phone. https://m/sashu.com. Chapter 92. You can search Transmigration system. My idol, come to Sashu.com on Baidu to find the. Bai Yaoyao thought that she was definitely going to die. Her neck was being strangled by Wei Wei Bai, and her face turned green. Just before she was pinched to the point where her eyes rolled back, Bai Wei Wei suddenly let go of her hand, and her whole body crashed into her, smashing her to the ground. Bai Yaoyao's organs hurt from the pressure. However, this also allowed her to feel the warmth of Wei Wei Bai's body. Was it warm, or was it human? Didn't they say that she was already dead? How could she still be alive? Bai Yaoyao was shocked and confused. She immediately pushed Wei Wei Bai away and was about to kick her a few times to vent her anger. In the darkness, Bai Changyin's voice suddenly sounded. Yaoyao, what are you doing? Bai Yaoyao was shocked. She immediately turned around and saw her father standing by the side. Her expression changed and she immediately cried. I don't know why elder sister suddenly ran over and wanted to strangle me. Bai Changyin looked at Wei Wei Bai, who was lying on the ground, and his expression changed drastically. He hurriedly pressed the emergency bell and called the doctors and nurses over. Wei Wei Bai was quickly carried away, but Bai Changyin's gaze turned cold as he looked at Bai Yaoyao. I think I heard Wei Wei say that she wants you to pay for your life? Bai Yaoyao lowered her head, and a sinister look flashed across her eyes. When she raised her head again, her face was filled with confusion. I really don't know. Father, I came to cover you with a blanket, but when I opened the door, I saw elder sister standing outside and trying to strangle me. Look at my bruised neck. I almost died. Bai Changyin snorted coldly. It better be like this. Before your elder sister wakes up, I will ask someone else to take care of the company. You should take care of your family first. Bai Yaoyao pinched her palm and pretended to be worried. But the company is so big. How can I rest assured if it's not my own family managing it? Bai Changyin didn't have time to care about her. He was worried about what happened to his eldest daughter. Every time she woke up, she would target Bai Yaoyao. He couldn't help but think about it. They are all old employees of the company. They are loyal, so there's no need to worry. Bai Yaoyao knew that Bai Changyin would never relent. She looked at the operating theater. Damn it, why did he wake up? Those poisons could kill anyone with a single touch. Why was she the only one who didn't die? Was she really the kind of person who was blessed by the heavens? When Qin Xiu rushed to the hospital, Wei Wei Bai had stabilized, but she was still unconscious. He was still worried. So he personally checked her and found that there was no poison in her body. At first, he thought that no one had poisoned Wei Wei Bai, but after asking around, he found out that someone had indeed swapped the medicine for Wei Wei Bai. However, for some reason, Wei Wei Bai was fine. Qin Xiu was puzzled. He was most afraid of conspiracy. Otherwise, he would not stay in the hospital and not manage the family business. After confirming that Wei Wei Bai was fine, Qin Xiu went to find Yi Yuxuan. Yi Yuxuan had already gone to work. He watched videos on his laptop as he worked. Qin Xiu told Yi Yuxuan about Wei Wei Bai's situation, and Yi Yuxuan did not react. It was normal that there was no reaction. Yi Yuxuan was colder than the North and South Poles combined. But why did he keep watching the video? Could it be the information needed for the meeting? Qin Xiu casually glanced at Yi Yuxuan's laptop, which was playing. Kong said, Zoe, I love you so much that my heart hurts. Crepe Myrtle said, if you're in pain, I'm in pain too. You are in pain, but I am in more pain. Qin Xiu, /crossover system, Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu.com/fast transmigration system. Adonis, come here below to record the reading record. Fast transmigration system. Adonis, come here, comma. Chapter 93. Qin Xiu silently turned his head back and looked at Yi Yuxuan, who was wearing a one-sided headset and holding a folder in one hand. But her eyes were still looking at Princess Pearl. You look at this? Yi Yuxuan nodded coldly. Study it? Qin Xiu felt that his voice was floating. Study what? Yi Yuxuan said blankly, love. Look at how other people fall in love. Maybe you can know how my dream affects my emotions. Qin Xiu reached out and held his heart. Love? Looking at Princess Pearl studying love. My God, this world is so cold, ruthless, and unreasonable. He felt that he must have not woken up yet. It was too shocking. Wei Wei Bai was dizzy and had just opened her eyes when she saw the tablecloth flying. Then there was a crash. The tablecloth and the food on the table all fell to the ground. A magnetic voice, like a violin string, with a very sarcastic tone, said, These things are more suitable for dogs to eat. Wei Wei Bai looked up and saw the man in front of her with a suffocatingly handsome face, looking at her with incomparable boredom. I won't come back tonight, he said in a casual tone, then turned and left. The door was vigorously opened and slammed shut. Wei Wei Bai reached out and rubbed her forehead. I didn't strangle that little bitch just now. I'm so angry. System. Cough. Digest the memory. This task time is also 3 months. Compared to 1 month, 3 months was much more lenient. Wei Wei Bai calmed down and accepted the memory, but she still had the familiar headache. After the headache, she looked at the mess on the ground speechlessly. The system's voice also sounded. The task is to get the love of Hipone. The target is Hipone. Task completion 0. Ding. The male lead's favorability is -15. Wei Wei Bai felt that it was normal for the favorability to be negative. If she was Hipone, it was estimated that it would be -50. Because this time, Bai Wei Wei wasn't a stupid person. Instead, it was a matter of forcefully seizing. Hipone had a face that could turn the world upside down. Coupled with good acting skills, he was born to mix in the entertainment industry. When he had just entered the entertainment industry, Wei Wei Bai had taken a liking to him. At that time, Wei Wei Bai was a super actress in the entertainment industry. Whether it was connections or resources, She was much better than Hipone. She liked Hipone, so she directly wanted to support him. But Hipone didn't want to. Which man was willing to be a gigolo? In the end, Wei Wei Bai directly cut off his acting career path, leaving him with no shows to film and no work to do. She could torment him however she wanted. Hipone stubbornly refused to agree. Wei Wei Bai's hand was ruthless. She let people set a trap for him and made him sign a super unreasonable contract. He didn't even have the chance to earn money before he was cheated of tens of millions. Hipone's family background was not good. Although his family was not so poor that they couldn't open a nest, they definitely couldn't afford tens of millions. In addition, his parents' health was not good. Hipone was basically supporting the family, so Hipone could only swallow the shame and sell himself to Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai took him to get the marriage certificate on the same day. However, Hipone made 3 rules. First, she couldn't sleep with him without his consent. Second, the marriage must be hidden and no one could find out that they were married. Third, the contract was only for 5 years. After 5 years, it would be invalid and he would be free. Wei Wei Bai agreed to all of them. Today, there were only 2 months before Hipone's freedom. The download address is at https://www.sashu.com. Chapter 94. After Wei Wei Bai read these memories, she only had one feeling. The modern version, the overbearing president fell in love with me. In Wei Wei Bai's view, these 5 years of getting along were basically equivalent to not getting along at all. Because Hipone didn't want to get close to Wei Wei Bai at all, he just wanted to get through the 5 years quickly. So he had been desperately taking on roles. Coupled with the resources given to him by Wei Wei, he had both talent and face, and became popular in an instant. These 5 years were enough to turn Hipone into a super actor in the entertainment industry. He had countless fans, countless resources, and even opened his own studio a year ago. He directed and acted in a movie, which grossed billions and won countless awards. Now Hipone was no longer under Wei Wei Bai's control. Hipone didn't leave because of the contract. It was estimated that after 2 months, he could directly take out tens of millions of yuan and throw the divorce agreement in Wei Wei Bai's face and tell her to get out. System, if I force myself on Hipone now, wouldn't it be a typical president's plot? There was a forced contract and a secret marriage agreement. All that was left was to drag her to bed. The system looked up and down at Wei Wei Bai. You force yourself on him? Can you force yourself on him? Wei Wei Bai poured herself a glass of water, took a sip and said, It's been almost 5 years, but the result is that these 2 people live under the same roof, like a landlord and a tenant who don't need to see each other. Hipone's favorability didn't increase at all. It shows. The system couldn't help but ask, what does it show? Wei Wei Bai laughed twice. It shows that the original owner is an idiot in love. She likes a man and wants to snatch him, but this man is acting outside every day and only comes back 10 days a year. How can she bear it? And 10 days a year was because Hipone came back to get things and then left in a hurry. Or they would occasionally come back to sleep and lock their doors tightly. Then, they would wake up early and run out again. Anyway, Hipone basically ate and lived in the crew. With his current identity, he could receive any kind of drama. It was too easy to avoid Wei Wei Bai. Therefore, after almost 5 years, Hipone was able to perfectly avoid Wei Wei Bai. This was simply a talent. Wei Wei Bai paced back and forth a few times and suddenly said, I can't go on like this. If there is no contract, I don't think I can get close to Hipone. At that time, Hipone might not come to kill her. After all, the original owner had already retired from the entertainment industry. Now Hipone was the king of the entertainment industry. Wei Wei Bai opened the wine cabinet and took out all the liquor that was used for decoration. Then, she began to sprinkle the liquor around. Soon, the room was filled with the smell of alcohol. The system covered its nose. Do you want to burn yourself? Just turn on the gas. There's no need to ruin things like this. Wei Wei Bai coldly snorted. Even if I burn myself, I will drag you down with me. Our feelings are so good. How can I bear to let such a beautiful person like you be polluted by the filthy world? System, you are ruthless. After arranging everything, Wei Wei Bai opened the phone records and soon saw Hipone's phone number. She first brewed her emotions and then called him. Hipon did not answer. She called again. He did not answer. She called again and again and again. After more than a dozen calls, Hipon finally answered the phone. Wei Bai, do you know that I am shooting a night scene now? You are so annoying. You keep calling me. //T. Chapter 95. On the other side of the phone, Wei Bai was terribly quiet. Hipon was very impatient. If you have something to say, I'll give you 10 seconds, or I'll hang up. Suddenly, there was a cry on the other side of the phone. First, it was a humble cry. Then it became more and more uncontrollable. The cry gradually became louder and louder, full of grief and depression. Hipon was stunned. Wei Bai? Wei Bai didn't speak. She just kept crying, crying so desperately, so heartbreakingly. It was as if she had encountered the saddest thing in the world. Although Hipon hated Wei Bai, he had never seen her cry like this. He frowned. What's wrong with you? If something happens, call the police. What's the use of crying? But Wei acted as if she didn't hear him. Instead, she said vaguely, Come back, okay? Come back, okay? Hipon's face flashed a trace of gloom, and his tone was still impatient. I'm filming. I won't go back tonight. Wei Bai sobbed and said, Just come back. She was not normal at all. It was as if she was not sober. Hipon wanted to refuse, but the phone was suddenly hung up. What's going on? Hipon threw the phone on the table, and then said to the assistant next to him, Continue filming? But he didn't know why. Even after several takes, he still couldn't calm down. His mind kept replaying Wei Bai's phone call. Why did she cry so desperately? That feeling of despair was really hard to ignore. Even if he hated her, the contract would expire in 2 months. If something happened to her, it would be impossible to terminate the contract. Hipon found a reason to go back and see. He took off his costume and threw it to the assistant next to him. I'm going back. I'll be back soon. Go back and see. It won't take more than an hour. Hipon returned to his residence, took out the key to open the door, and smelled a strong smell of alcohol. Wei Bai drank? Didn't she never drink? He heard movement in the living room. Just as he walked over, he heard the sound of the TV on. One of his dramas from last year was playing. On the other hand, Wei Bai was curled up on the sofa with a beer bottle in her hand. Her long hair was in a mess as she watched the television. Her eyes were red, and she didn't look as delicate as usual. Instead, she looked particularly embarrassed. Wei Bai. Hipon was a little angry and unbuttoned his collar. His beautiful eyebrows were full of annoyance. Are you done yet? Just as he reached the sofa, he paused. This was because Wei Bai's eyes were not focused at all. She was just staring at the TV series. Wei Bai suddenly smiled, and her eyes became pure. When I met you, it was summer. When you smiled, I felt that all the sunshine in the world fell into my heart. In the TV series, the male lead played by Hipon also said this line almost at the same time. Even he had forgotten the lines at that time, but she remembered them clearly. Hipon didn't know why, but his breath was suffocating for a second. When she said this sentence, it was particularly beautiful. Wei Bai looked up and seemed to be unable to see the person. She asked strangely, Who are you? Hipon said in disgust, Who can I be? If you called me here to see you go crazy, then I won't accompany you. After that, he planned to turn around and leave. As a result, he had just taken 2 steps when he heard Wei Bai call softly, Pon. She said who he was, but now she called him. He couldn't act well. Teeth. Chapter 96. Hipon was about to ridicule her, but he heard Wei Bai sigh and say, He won't come back. Pon won't come back. Won't come back? Then is he dead now? Hipon's heart was filled with anger. He was about to turn around and ridicule her a few times when he heard Wei Bai whisper, He hates me so much. How could he come back? Wei Bai held the bottle and leaned her head on the sofa. Her eyes were fragile and confused. I know he hates me. He hates me very much. Hipon breathed heavily. This was the first time he heard Wei Bai say these words. The scene of her forcing him was still vivid in his mind. For him, it was a shame for a lifetime. He thought that this woman was only after his face. After all, he had seen too many women crazy for his face since he was a child. She was always very delicate in front of him. Even if she called him to come back, she would use a very reserved tone. It was as if he was a dog she raised. He was more and more disgusted with coming back, and more disgusted with receiving her calls. Wei Bai didn't seem to notice Hipon. She continued to drink, but there was only a small sip left in her bottle. She shook the bottle desperately, but there was nothing left. Wei Bai felt wronged. She slammed the bottle to the ground. Even you bully me. You all bully me. If it weren't for the wrong scene, Hipon would be amused by her cute actions. Bai Wei stood up shakily and stepped over the shards of the wine bottles with her bare feet. Hipon's heart tightened. He frowned and almost didn't think much. He reached out and picked her up. So light? This was the first time Hipon held her like this. Her soft body was full of alcohol, but it didn't smell bad. Wei Bai shook her head and seemed to find that she was being held. She immediately became alert and angry. Who are you? Put me down. Hipon's eyes were cold. Wei Bai usually spoke like this, full of a cold feeling. He pursed his lips and suddenly threw her onto the sofa. Then, he grabbed Wei Bai's hand murderously. Wei Bai, I've tolerated you for long enough. If you're not even willing to put in the effort for these 2 months, then we'll divorce now. Anyway, I'm just a toy that you bought 5 years ago. You should have seen enough after so many years. He was just looking. He would never touch her, nor would he let her touch him. In the second year of their secret marriage, Wei Bai could no longer threaten him. The reason why he stayed behind was because he wanted to remember this lesson as a humiliation. He wanted to warn himself that he would never be trampled on like this again. So for the past 5 years, he treated Wei Bai like air. As long as she didn't bother him, he would turn a blind eye. But today, this woman had crossed the line. Hipon shook off her hand. His delicate and handsome face under the light was cold and grim. He smiled coldly. Our status has long been changed. If you don't want to be killed by me after the divorce, you should be good for me. Wei Bai stared at him and seemed to be afraid. Hipon looked at her contemptuously, then turned and walked away. As a result, he didn't take a few steps when the woman behind him stumbled over. He didn't know what she tripped over, but she bumped into his back. She didn't hit him with much strength, but it angered him. Hipon turned around angrily, his eyes sharp. You better not. A warm kiss blocked his lips. It was filled with the smell of alcohol and passionate affection, which made him completely stunned. To read the ad, https://www.sashu.com/to read at https://www.sashu.com.txt to read at https://m/sashu.com. Chapter 97. Wei Bai's eyes were confused. She grabbed his arm with both hands and pressed him against the door. She stood on her tiptoes and raised her head like a graceful and proud swan, desperately chasing after the warmth she wanted. Hipon's nose was full of her breath, the smell of her body, her fierce heartbeat, and her soft body. Everything, all of a sudden, rushed to him. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at -5. Hipon was lost in the smell of this woman for a second, but soon he woke up. He seemed to understand something. Anger rushed to his mind like a violent storm. He pushed Wei Bai away. You've given me enough. Bai Wei was pushed away and fell to the ground, weakly lying on her stomach. Hipon rubbed his lips hard, as if he could wipe away her taste. He said in disgust, Do you think you can make me sleep with you? Even if all the women in the world are dead, I won't touch you. Wei Bai was still lying motionless. Hipon stared at her. Wei Bai, don't play tricks anymore. Don't make me look down on you even more. Wei Bai was very quiet. Hipon realized that something was wrong. He walked over and kicked Wei Bai. Hey woman, don't pretend to be dead. The system said, Fuck, you've been kicked by someone. Wei Bai, who pretended to be unconscious. With this kind of character, how come he hasn't been beaten to death? Hipon squatted down and lifted the long hair covering her face. He found that Wei Wei Bai was frowning and her cheeks were abnormally red. Fever? He looked at her face and knew that her body temperature was abnormal. Hipon immediately took out his and called his assistant. Xiaomu, give me. His voice suddenly paused because Wei Wei Bai was wearing silk pajamas. When she laid on the ground, half of her fair shoulder was exposed. Her thick black hair was spread all over the ground, and her delicate white skin was suffused with a light pink color, giving people a kind of flirtatious feeling. This kind of Wei Wei Bai was different from the Wei Wei Bai he usually saw. He had never seen such a weak and delicate side of her. Little Moo said, "Brethren, what's wrong? An hour has passed. The director is asking if we should continue." Hipon hesitated for a few seconds before saying, "Tonight's scene will be filmed tomorrow night. You let them wrap up, I take a break." Xiaomu didn't think too much about it. Hipon hadn't rested for 2 days and 2 nights. It was only right for him to rest. He immediately agreed. Hipon hung up the phone and his face became even more ugly. He should have thrown her to his assistant. How could he be afraid that she would be taken advantage of? Why did he care if this woman lived or died? Hipon suppressed his anger. There were only 2 months left, so it didn't matter if he endured it. He reached out and picked up Wei Wei Bai. It was the second time he held her, but her weight was still so light that he frowned. But he was angry and couldn't help but say sarcastically, "You're as heavy as a pig." The system immediately complained, "Host, he is insulting you." Wei Wei Bai, "Today I don't look at me. Tomorrow I'll make him look like he can't." Hipon threw her on the bed and reached out to rub her forehead. Her fever didn't subside. He coldly snorted, "It's better if you burn to death." He said so, but he still rummaged through the medicine box, found the fever medicine, and directly stuffed it into Wei Wei Bai's mouth. It was rough and forceful, as if he was dealing with an enemy who killed his father. The download address is at https://www.sashu.com. Chapter 98. Of course, Wei Wei Bai couldn't swallow it. She frowned uncomfortably. Hipon was impatient and reached out to pinch her face. "Woman, swallow the medicine." Wei Wei Bai was even more uncomfortable. She suddenly reached out and grabbed something. Her whole body turned sideways and she vomited. Hipon stiffened. The place she grabbed was his lower body, and the place she vomited was his pants. Bai Wei Wei. Hipon went crazy. He was a clean freak and almost exploded. After Wei Wei Bai vomited, she felt that her mouth was sticky and disgusting. She grabbed the hem of his shirt and wiped her mouth. Then she rolled back to bed and hugged the quilt to sleep. Hipon trembled with anger and felt that he was going to explode. Between strangling Wei Wei Bai and going to the bathroom, he chose the latter with difficulty. After taking 3 showers, he walked out with a towel wrapped around his waist and opened the closet to search. Where were his clothes? There were only Wei Wei Bai's clothes left in the closet. None of his clothes were there. When he went out just now, his things were still there. Hipon turned around and found that all his things were gone. Not only his clothes, but even his toothbrush, shaver, cup, and other things were gone. He angrily reached out and pulled Wei Wei Bai. "Woman, where are my things?" Bai Wei Wei was in a daze, as if she was disturbed. Her thick eyelashes trembled slightly, and she said vaguely, "Bowen?" Hipon didn't have a good temper to greet her. "Where are my things?" Wei Wei Bai looked at him blankly. It seemed that she couldn't distinguish between dream and reality. She suddenly smiled sadly. "I sent them away. I sent them away. Didn't you say you wouldn't come back?" Hipon gritted his teeth. "When did I say I wouldn't come back?" The tears in Wei Wei Bai's eyes condensed, but they refused to fall. "The last time you left me for 97 days, you only came back for 1 night. Last time, you left me for 68 days before you came back to get your things. Last time you left me for 103 days. You just sat at the door and asked your assistant to tell me that you were going to film again." Hipon was stunned and didn't know what to say. Wei Wei Bai stubbornly looked at him with reddened eyes. If you leave me today, the next time we meet will probably be when we get a divorce. No, maybe what I saw was only the divorce agreement. I packed up your things first and sent them to Xiaomu. Did I do something wrong? He was absolutely right. Hipon really wanted to live with the crew for 2 months, and then sent her the divorce agreement when the time was up. Wei Wei Bai suddenly covered her head with the blanket and cried, "Don't disturb me again. Why do I still see you after drinking so much? When I go out, I see your advertisement poster. When I buy something, I see the products you endorse. When I turn on the TV, I see the TV series you starred in. Even now, when I want to sleep, you won't let me go even in my dreams." Hipon's chest tightened and he said, "Do I look that bad? Do you think you're dreaming?" Wei Wei Bai was quiet and forbearing. After a while, he heard her say lightly, "If it's not a dream, how can you say so much to me? You hate me, hate me, hate me." This sentence was filled with pain and resignation. Hipon heard it and felt wronged. He felt wronged for the woman he hated. He was a hot-tempered person. He couldn't stand Wei Wei by suddenly becoming like a little wife. Not only did she cry, but she also hid and cried by herself. Why didn't he know before that this woman was so fragile, so disappointing? Ding! The male lead's favorability is 0. The system was dumbfounded. How did the favorability increase? How did it go down to -15? NT. Chapter 99. Wei Wei Bai cried and gradually lost her voice. Hipon hesitated for a while, then walked over to pull her quilt and saw that she had fallen asleep. He shook her angrily, "Woman, wake up." Wei Wei Bai was tired, and she may have brought some negative effects when she came, causing her body to start to have a fever. So now she was in a semi-conscious state and couldn't respond to him. Drinking when you have a fever, you don't even know when you will die. Hipon coldly snorted. He stood naked and suddenly felt cold. Wasn't there a heater? He reached for the remote control of the air conditioner, but there was no response. The broken air conditioner was broken. It was now late autumn, and the night was particularly cool. Hipon frowned and went out. He came to his room and found that the air conditioner was working. Although his things were taken away, the bedding was still there. Hipon directly lay on the bed in his room. Anyway, he was not cold. As for Wei Wei Bai, it was none of his business. He pulled the quilt and covered his head to sleep. He didn't rest for more than 2 days and he felt tired. But he didn't know why, but he turned over and over, and his mind was full of Wei Wei Bai's miserable crying in front of him tonight. When had he ever seen her so weak and lowly? It was as if her hard shell was broken, leaving only the soft inside. And she had a fever, and there was no heater. He heard that some people would die of a fever. That woman was simply a disaster. She shouldn't die so easily. Hipon turned over for a few minutes, got up grumpily, and then rushed to Wei Wei Bai's room. He found that this woman was not sleeping well. She even kicked the quilt away, and her face was as red as a monkey's butt. This was simply courting death. Hipon reached out and touched her forehead, which was even hotter. Wei Wei Bai was uncomfortably hot, and suddenly felt that her forehead was a little cold. She couldn't help but rub it, like a cat that couldn't wake up. Hipon felt her gentle rubbing against him. Her bangs touched the back of his hand, causing his skin to tremble. He quickly took his hand back and shook it a few times, as if he could get rid of the feeling that Wei Wei Bai gave him. Then, he immediately took out the fever medicine from the medical kit. This time, he had to make her take the medicine no matter what. He poured warm water and stuffed the medicine into her mouth. Then, he reached out to hold her head and fed her water. However, Wei Wei Bai's expression turned ugly, as if she was about to vomit again. Hipon didn't know what was wrong with him, but his mind was full of thoughts of making her take the medicine. By the time he realized what he was doing, his lips had already sealed hers, forcefully and roughly forcing her to swallow the pill. Wei Wei Bai had difficulty breathing and quickly swallowed the medicine. As for Hipon, it was as if he was struck by lightning. He maintained the action of kissing her and stiffened for several seconds. Then, he pushed Wei Wei Bai away, his whole body bristling. "Ba ba ba, I'm bewitched." He hurriedly ran to rinse his mouth, and when he finished rinsing, he found that he was holding Wei Wei Bai's cup. Hipon put down the cup in his hand, as if the whole world owed him 8 billion yuan, and returned to Wei Wei Bai's side. I really want to strangle you. Hipon picked her up with the quilt, and then strode to his room. He stuffed her into his bed, stuffed a pillow in the middle, and lay on the other side. Just think of it as my good intentions. Anyway, after tomorrow, we will never see each other again. /to-txt. Download. Chapter 100. Tomorrow, he would leave and live directly with the crew. 2 months later, he would send the divorce agreement, and these 5 years of shameful life would be over. Ding. The male lead's favorability has increased by 5. System. It had never seen such a weird and ridiculous way to upgrade favorability. It couldn't understand it all. This angry and irritable male lead. He was obviously so angry that he was about to explode. How could his favorability increase? Or was there a problem with its method of detecting favorability? The system silently started a self-check program to check if it was poisoned. Wei Wei Bai had a fever, but her vigilance was not low. She was used to being sick since childhood, so she could endure a fever. She made sure that Hipon's breathing was steady and he fell asleep, and then she opened her eyes. After taking the fever medicine, people would feel better, and it was not serious. Wei Wei Bai carefully moved her body, pushed the pillow in the middle away, and then drilled into Hipon's arms, putting his hand on her waist. System. Wei Wei Bai sighed to the system. Tong tong. Hipon is a little demon who doesn't care about his mouth, but is very honest. You can't be hard on him. You have to be soft, so he will feel that he is awesome and first. After she read Hipon's information, she knew that this man could be soft but not hard, and her mouth was cheap. The harder she was to be hard on him, the more disgusted he would be. As long as she was a little soft, he would immediately be scared. Once she was scared, the favorability would come. Wei Wei Bai suddenly thought of something. Tong tong. Have I completed the side task of the last plane? The system flipped through the information. Completed. Although the male lead in the last plane was short-lived, he did lay a solid foundation for the dynasty and achieved prosperity. Wei Wei Bai was excited. What about my eternal youth reward? The system's forehead burst with blue veins, gritted its teeth and said, Please accept the reward, peak acting. Wei Wei Bai was a little disappointed. There was no eternal youth. After waiting for a while, Wei Wei Bai said, What is the peak acting? Why don't I feel anything at all? The system flipped through the folder again and said very calmly, Oh, your acting skills have long surpassed the peak, so the reward is invalid. If the host still wants the reward, please continue to work hard in this plane. Wei Wei Bai, he was obviously praising her, so why was she not happy at all? Wei Wei Bai complained a little before closing her eyes and falling asleep. She was also very tired after such a long time. Hipon's biological clock was very accurate. He opened his eyes at 6:00 in the morning. He was a little confused and didn't know where he was. His work as an actor had made him used to flying everywhere, and he was also used to a wandering life. He felt something soft and warm in his arms. Hipon frowned and lowered his head to see Wei Wei Bai leaning against his bare chest, delicate like a boneless flower petal. Before he could push her away, Wei Wei Bai's thick eyelashes fluttered, and she opened her misty eyes. Hipon was still naked, and Wei Wei Bai was in his arms. The two people stared at each other for a while. Wei Wei Bai seemed to think of something. She reached out and touched her face, and immediately an expression of horror appeared on her face. She immediately kicked Hipon away and rolled out of bed. Hipon was kicked in the stomach by her, and his face turned white. This kick was like killing him. He was already irritable. Last night, he was tossed around by Wei Wei Bai for half the night. As a result, today, Wei Wei Bai was not grateful, but she was also ungrateful. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.